Chapter 845. At the same time that Zhang Xiaohua entered the Emerald Lily Valley, at the western foot of the Lingering Fragrance Peak, there were a dozen masked women dressed in palace attire standing in a strange arrangement. They were standing in a rather large area. In the middle of them was a stone tablet that protruded from the ground. The stone tablet wasn't big, but there were strange patterns engraved on it. The sun that was high up in the sky was shining its light on the stone tablet. Under the sunlight, the patterns on the stone tablet were faintly visible, as if they were swimming. Around the stone tablet, there were 3 masked women who were also dressed in palace attire sitting cross-legged. However, their hair was already pure white, giving them a youthful appearance. The 3 women placed their hands in front of their chests. Their fingers were either bent or straight, and they were in the same position as Zhang Xiaohua when she was forming hand seals. However, their fingers were just standing there, not moving at all. Behind the 3 women was another woman, dressed in palace attire. She stood there majestically with her eyes closed. Suddenly, the woman who was standing there opened her eyes. She raised her head to look at the sky and said, "3 elders, it's time. Open the refining heart cave." "Yes, Lord Sect Leader," the 3 of them said in unison. At the same time, the 3 of them also extended their hands into their bosoms. Each of them took out a small stone and held it in their hands. Their previously frozen fingers began to twitch at this moment. Not long after, a faint red light rose from their right hands. The light grew brighter and brighter as time passed. When the brilliance reached a certain size, the 3 of them raised their heads and looked at each other. Then they threw the brilliance in their fingers forward, hitting the stone tablet in the middle of the 3 of them. Just when the brilliance in their hands hit the stone tablet, there was a hua sound. It was as if firewood had been ignited. The entire stone tablet immediately emitted a dazzling green brilliance. Following the brilliance, the patterns on the stone tablet seemed to have come to life and really started to move. As the patterns moved, the stone tablet gradually became transparent until it finally disappeared. At the place where the stone tablet disappeared, there was a 3 feet circle of light. The green brilliance came from within the circle of light. After a long while, the circle of light gradually stabilized. Even the patterns were steadily moving above the circle of light. Seeing the scene, the 3 old women let out a long breath. Looking at the stone in their hands that had shrunk a lot, they said in a low voice, "Lord Sect Leader, fortunately, we didn't disappoint you." "Good, all of you step to the side." With that, the hierarch walked forward and carefully looked at it. He nodded in satisfaction and turned to the dozen or so young female disciples with their faces covered. "Okay, the main selection that happens once every 10 years is about to begin. In the past 50 years, our Lingering Fragrance Peak hasn't been able to select a disciple that can inherit the position of hierarch. I hope that this time you can live up to the expectations of the thousands of disciples in Mo Xian Palace and pass the test of the Refining Heart Cave. Then we will select a few disciples that have the qualifications to inherit the position." Then she paused and raised her voice. "Although our Mo Xian Palace's secret inheritance room is gradually disappearing, even if all 18 of you can pass the Refining Heart Cave, the secret inheritance room will still provide enough space for you. So you don't have to worry. Take out your most powerful techniques and use your martial arts to prove that you are the most outstanding disciples of Mo Xian Palace. Yes, we will obey the Lord Sect Leader's orders." The 18 disciples said in unison with great momentum. When the Lord Sect Leader heard this, her expression under the veil was unknown. She turned around and reached into her bosom to take out a palm-sized jade tablet. Her right hand also moved and formed a seal, like Zhang Xiaohua. The Lord Sect Leader's technique was much more skillful than Zhang Xiaohua's. When the hierarch was done with the incantation, he raised his hand and a green brilliance hit the light circle. Immediately, the light circle began to ripple. Then the hierarch took out the jade token in his other hand and drew an arc in the air. landing on the rippling light circle. Like an ice cube falling into a fire, the jade token gradually melted. As the jade token melted, the light circle around the jade token gradually disappeared, and a pitch-black hole appeared. The hole grew bigger and bigger, and finally the entire light circle became a pitch-black hole. Following that, with a pung sound, a bunch of fireworks flew out from the cave entrance and landed on the heads of the 18 female disciples standing at the back. Then they disappeared. Okay, the Refining Heart Cave has been opened. Disciples, you can go in. The Lord sect leader's tone was still dignified. She said, I think your master has already told you about the matters in the Refining Heart Cave. There is nothing to pay attention to. Just follow your heart and rely on your own ability to pass. Chun-Chen, you go first. Peacock goes last. The other disciples will follow the order and enter one by one. Yes, Lord Sect Leader. A female disciple in green walked out from the crowd and walked to the left side of the cave. She leaped up slightly and drew a beautiful arc in the air before entering the Refining Heart Cave. Following that, each disciple entered the cave. Everyone's qigong was different, but they were all graceful. Only the peacock, who was wearing a pink palace dress, was the last to enter the cave. She was neither slow nor fast, neither hurried nor rushed. It was as if she was jumping a rubber band. With a small jump, she crossed the fluttering patterns and entered the dark cave. After the 18 disciples entered the Refining Heart Cave, the Lord Sect Leader coughed and said, Elders, how long can the primordial stones in your hands last? An old voice said, Lord Sect Leader, if there are no accidents, we should be able to use it 2 more times. Sigh. The Lord Sect Leader nodded and then sighed. We don't have much time left. Another voice sounded. Lord Sect Leader, in recent years, I have felt that the Lingxiang Peak's yuan qi has become slightly more abundant. There must be a great change in the world. Perhaps. The Lord Sect Leader nodded and then shook his head. Elder is right. There is indeed a change. Otherwise, our Jingbua Lake's passageway would not be stable. It's just that the Lingxiang Peak's yuan qi is still thin and cannot support our cultivation. Moreover, the primordial stones used to power the array are about to be used up. Although the Lingxiang Peak's yuan qi has changed, distant water cannot quench present thirst. Where can we find primordial stones to use? Then he said thoughtfully, no one from Mo Xiangong has passed the selection for 50 years. This time these 18 disciples, what do you think? This. The 3 women looked at each other, and one of them said, based on the way they entered the cave, their lightness skills are very good. But in terms of mentality, they are still lacking. It seems like only Peacock in the end has some confidence. Sai, that's right. The Refining Heart Cave refines the heart. Although martial arts is important, the most important thing is the state of mind. These children are all geniuses. How would they know the difficulties? However, the state of mind depends on the individual. Even if we explain it to them clearly, it will be useless. Instead, it will have a negative effect. Peacock's state of mind is fine, but her martial arts cultivation is still lacking. Moreover, this child's background is somewhat miserable. It is hard to guarantee that there will not be a crack in her heart. For this specific test, it is also a fatal flaw. Let's leave it to the heavens. This is all we can do. Perhaps after a few hundred years, our fragrant sect will be like the Misty School and the Shindao sect. We will all go into decline. The Lord Sect Leader was somewhat depressed. The 3 elders looked at each other and did not say anything. Peacock was the last to jump into the Refining Heart Cave. Once she jumped, she felt that there was starlight in front of her. However, there was nothing under her feet. She kept falling. Aya, what should we do? The lower I fall, the faster I fall. There is no place for me to grab onto. Won't I turn into a meat patty in the end? Peacock was flustered. Then she thought. Master said to only rely on the mind. There is no need to worry about it. I have never heard of anyone falling to their death in the Refining Heart Cave. Sure enough, once this thought came to her mind, Peacock's falling speed slowed down. Peacock had the time to look at her surroundings. This was an illusory space. The sky was filled with stars. Beneath her feet were also stars. Peacock was the only one in this space. She could not see the other 17 sisters who had entered before her. Not only that, Peacock was suspended in the air. It was as if she was flying. Peacock saw everything clearly. She was shocked. Is this the technique of the immortal path? Just as this thought came to her mind, a figure appeared in front of her eyes. "Master?" Peacock cried out. "Peacock, remember what I said. In this refining heart cave, what is real is fake and what is fake is real. Only by keeping your mind to yourself will you have a chance to break out of the illusion." As soon as he finished speaking, the figure turned into specks of light and disappeared without a trace. Peacock did not know how to face it. Is this Master? Did she have such great divine power? However, if it wasn't Master, who would repeat what he said to me yesterday? That's right. Yesterday Abbess Jingfan had warned Peacock that the refining heart cave was an illusory array. Everything inside was fake, but these fake things were often the trial takers' own inner demons. They were the reflection of their true desires. If they wanted to break out of the refining heart cave, then they would have to kill their own inner demons and break through the illusory array. Perhaps this is the effect of the illusion. Peacock was enlightened. This was what Jingfan Nun had told her the other day. Peacock remembered it well. Once she entered the illusion, it was revealed. But what is my inner demon? Peacock thought to herself. Before she knew it, her feet had stopped moving. It was as if she was standing on solid ground. At the same time, the space in front of Peacock shook and collapsed. The scene that appeared in front of Peacock made her furious. -4. Chapter 846. In front of Peacock was a quaint, tranquil little courtyard with a pond of lotus flowers, a few ducks, and a bed of peonies on the bank. Peacock's heart thumped wildly at the sight. Just as she was about to take a step forward, something even more shocking happened. She suddenly realized that she was no longer the young woman from before, but a little girl with small arms and legs. When she reached a pond, was the reflection of a little girl. Have I returned to the past? However, before Peacock could think of this, an even more terrifying thought suddenly intruded. Could it be that bloody afternoon? Peacock's childish little face immediately turned pale. If her memory served her right, in another 2 hours her gentle and polite father would return from outside reeking of alcohol. This time he would no longer call Peacock by her pet name and play with her as usual. Her father, who had a rough career ahead of him, would arrive at the Silver Hook Casino 5 miles away and sell this ancestral house, Peacock's mother, and even Peacock to someone else. Peacock watched as her mother, who loved her dearly, fell into the pond in front of her. After her father sobered up, he was even more remorseful and slammed his head against a pillar to commit suicide. A perfect family was destroyed in an instant. Peacock cried and screamed as she was taken away by the casino's thugs. She was caught halfway when she tried to escape and was almost beaten to death. However, she met Abbess Jingfan and was brought to Lingering Fragrance Peak. These were the secrets hidden deep in Peacock's heart. Apart from Abbess Jingfan, His Eminence, and a few other people, even Chin Chin did not know. The trauma of her childhood had long been buried deep in Peacock's heart, and she never wanted to think of it again. However, it was here, inadvertently and inevitably, it appeared in front of Peacock's eyes. Swoosh! Peacock's face was covered in sweat. Reliving the tragedy of her childhood made her feel like she had a sudden epiphany. Then, another absurd thought rose in her mind. Can I stop this tragedy from happening? With this in mind, Peacock immediately moved her little legs and ran toward the greenhouse. In her memory, her mother was brewing her favorite nail polish in the greenhouse. As expected, when Peacock pushed open the greenhouse door and saw the face of her mother that she had not seen for many years, she immediately burst into tears and threw herself at her mother. Peacock's mother was even more surprised. She carefully hugged Peacock and tried her best to comfort her. After a long while, Peacock stopped crying and pulled her mother to look for her father. However, Peacock's mother did not know where her husband was. If it was any other day, she would have made excuses and stayed at home with her child to play. But this time, no matter what she did, she could not stop Peacock. Under Peacock's lead, they walked for a full 5 miles and finally arrived at the Silverhook Casino. They found her father, who was about to be dragged into the casino by a group of people after he had drunk some wine. The rest of the story was even more natural. Everything was changed by Peacock. Peacock's father became a high-ranking official, and the whole family became more prosperous. Peacock herself became a famous figure and finally married a famous scholar and gave birth to a son and daughter. Peacock, the most promising candidate for the lingering fragrance peaks, Mo Xiangong. Once she entered the refining heart cave, she immediately fell into an illusion. Her mind was lost, and while she was enjoying the world, she had forgotten everything. She only knew how to be a good wife to her husband and children. At the entrance of Lai Chui Valley, Zhang Xiaohua was bold and did not speak much with Mei Suying. She held the great wisdom sword and entered the haunted valley. Outside of the ghost valley, there was not much feeling. The entrance of the valley was cold and cheerless, without any greenery. After entering the ghost valley, a chilly aura hit their faces, causing them to shiver a few times. Zhang Xiaohua stopped and looked up. Wasn't it just as Zhang Pinger said? The scenery inside the haunted valley was completely different from the beautiful scenery outside. The ground and rocks in the haunted valley were dark brown. The trees that grew on the ground were also very short. Most of them were about the height of a person. The branches and leaves on the trees were grayish-brown, as if there was a layer of dust. The grass on the ground was replaced by mushrooms. The dark brown crown and grayish-white stem looked very eerie. Occasionally, one could see herbs growing between the mushrooms. The herbs were green with a tinge of black, and the fruits on the top of the herbs were either gray, black, or dark red. One look and one could tell that they were not materials used for alchemy. In addition to these, the most eye-catching thing was the grayish-black clouds floating in the haunted valley. These clouds were different from the ones Zhang Xiaohua saw at the top of Shixin Peak. The clouds there were bundles and piles. Here, the grayish-black clouds were wisps and streaks. However, most of these clouds gathered on the ground and wrapped around the herbs and trees. Zhang Xiaohua had already been warned by Zhang Pinger. She only took a breath. When she smelled a rotten stench in the haunted valley, she immediately stopped breathing and silently operated the Worry-Free Heart Sutra to operate the genuine qi in her body. Zhang Xiaohua observed the scene in the haunted valley. She walked along the path of the haunted valley. Because the herbs and mushrooms here were different from those outside the haunted valley, Zhang Xiaohua was also curious and picked some as she walked. After walking for a while, she saw more trees and more haunted fog. Zhang Xiaohua released her divine sense. The haunted fog was a strange thing. In her divine sense, she could faintly feel the fluctuation of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. But if she carefully identified it, it was very different from the haunted fog that Zhang Xiaohua had refined before. If she forced herself to compare, it was somewhat similar to the haunted fog in the cave that Zhang Xiaohua had mistakenly entered on the way to the incense cult. Of course, it was only similar. Just based on Zhang Xiaohua's senses, she knew that it was very different. After seeing more haunted fog, Zhang Xiaohua unconsciously became more careful. Her footsteps slowed down, and she became more careful when picking herbs and wild mushrooms. After walking for a while, she saw that she had arrived at a gentle slope. The haunted fog below the slope was even more dense. At a glance, she could not see through it. Zhang Xiaohua also unconsciously stopped. Along the way, she also picked some wild mushrooms. Of course, there were also the ghost-faced mushrooms that Zhang Pinger had told her about outside the haunted valley. Unfortunately, even Zhang Xiaohua herself knew that the ghost-faced mushrooms that she had picked before were only 10 years old or even a few years old. It was not even close to the 1,000-year-old ghost-faced mushrooms that Mei Sujin had requested. If she wanted to complete Mei Sujin's task, Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to walk to this gentle slope. She walked to a place where the haunted fog was denser. However, Zhang Xiaohua stood quietly on the gentle slope and did not move. After a long while, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly turned around and sneered at a short tree. "This masked brother. Shouldn't you have come out earlier?" Ha ha ha. After hearing Zhang Xiaohua's words, a white figure walked out from the tree. Zhang Xiaohua's expression did not change. She smiled and said, "This brother seems to be very confident in your qigong. You are actually wearing a white robe while following behind me. Don't tell me you don't know that everything in Lichui Valley is gray?" The figure walked to the front and stood in the distance. He was about the same height as Zhang Xiaohua. The eyes that were exposed outside the mask were slightly squinted. His white robe was particularly eye-catching in this gray-black forest. The person laughed and said, "I didn't expect this little brother to be so vigilant. I was already very careful, but I was still discovered by you." Zhang Xiaohua sneered, "Brother, why are you following me? Are you waiting for me to drop some copper coins?" The person looked at Zhang Xiaohua with amusement. "Little brother, in this windy haunted valley, in this cold haunted fog, what do you think I can do by following you? If little brother has some copper coins to drop, that would be the best. Next year on this day, I will also make some paper money and burn it for you. What do you think? Are you that confident, Senior Yu Zhuqiuan?" Zhang Xiaohua licked her lips and looked at the person's mask with interest. If I knew it. What's the use of wearing a mask?" Yu Zhuqiuan took off the mask and stuffed it into his chest. He then said, "Rin Xiaoyao, your eyes are quite sharp. You can actually tell that it's me? You. Why don't you think it's Yan Jianhan? I remember that Yan Jianhan dragged you over yesterday and gave you a good beating. Hee, don't tell me that the two of you have already buried the hatchet." Yu Zhuqiuan looked at Zhang Xiaohua and said frivolously, "Zhang Pinger is a beautiful woman. Do you think Yan Jianhan will give her to you so easily? That's not something, senior brother, you should worry about." Zhang Xiaohua sneered and said, "Whether senior sister Zhang is a beautiful woman or not is not something, senior, you can find out in the future." "Ioyo, junior brother Rin, you are so arrogant. You really scared me." Yu Zhuqiuan patted his chest and shouted exaggeratedly, "Luckily, the wind in Ghost Valley is not strong. Otherwise, junior brother Ren's tongue would have been blown off. Let the wind blow harder." Zhang Xiaohua shouted to the sky, "Blow off my tongue!" Ha ha ha. Yu Zhuqiuan laughed and said, "Junior brother Ren, don't waste your time. No one has come to Ghost Valley for so many years. Even if you shout until your throat breaks, no one will hear you." "Is that so?" Zhang Xiaohua heard and smiled mysteriously. "This is a good place to silence people. No wonder, senior brother, you wants to come. Could it be that you have the same idea as me? Junior brother Ren, you are indeed a bold and skillful person." Yu Zhuqiuan also smiled and gave him a thumbs up. "Or should I say, the ignorant are fearless, to be praised by this senior brother. Even if you die here, you can rest assured." -4. Chapter 847. I wouldn't dare. Humph, junior brother Rin is talking so much with me. Could it be that you still have delusions in your heart? Yu Zhuqiuan said with a smile, "Since I have already shown my true face, I have already made preparations to silence you. Junior brother Rin, save your strength. You may be able to withstand a few moves." "Oh, right. I still have to advise junior brother Rin, you'd better kill yourself. This way I can leave you with an intact corpse. If you let me pull out my sword, it's possible that I'll cut you into 70 or 80 pieces, or even chop you into minced meat and feed it to the dogs." Ouch. Zhang Xiaohua shivered, as if he was having a cold war, and said with a trembling voice, You really need to do this? There really is nothing between me and senior sister Zhang. What's the point of saying this now? Yu Zhuqiuan sneered. Do you want to do it yourself, or do you want me to do it? Zhang Xiaohua said with a smirk. Ouch, wouldn't it be very painful if I did it myself? I've been afraid of pain since I was young, Let's forget about it. How about I trouble you to come and take my life? Then he thought for a moment and slightly frowned. Also, this little brother's meat doesn't taste good. Please don't let any wild dogs eat it. I remember that last time Lord Chin came to Shirxin Peak to deal with a guy called Zhao Jian, saying that he was going to cut him into pieces and feed him to wild dogs. Oh my, where did Chuanxiang cult see wild dogs? How do you want to feed them? Zhang Xiaohua's face was full of panic, but his mouth was still laughing. How was he at the end of the road? This caused Yu Zhuqiuan to be extremely bewildered. While she was puzzled, she also became extremely vigilant. She circulated her energy to the extreme and observed the surrounding situation with her eyes. It was no different from usual. She couldn't see any helpers. Could it be? This guy is a great master? Yu Zhuqiuan looked at the fearless Zhang Xiaohua, and this thought quietly rose in his heart. But then he immediately denied it. How is that possible? Even if this guy had practiced internal strength since he was a child, he still wouldn't be my opponent, let alone an alchemy boy from the Pill Tower Hall. It was said that a few years ago there was also a disciple from the Pill Tower Hall who was given an internal strength mental cultivation method by the inner gate and entered the Wombing Hall. Was this guy the same as that disciple? Alas, even if it's the same, he still died in my hands. Yes, it must be a stalling tactic. Yu Zhuqiuan was similarly confident. She reached out her hand and pulled out a long sword that was shining brightly from her waist. She said with a smile, "Since Junior Brother Rin is so polite, I will make the first move." As he spoke, he thrust his sword forward and executed his movement technique. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and raised her heavy sword to meet the long sword in front of her. With a clang, the long sword was knocked far away. Zhang Xiaohua's heavy sword did not lose its momentum and continued to smash towards Yu Zhuqiuan's chest. Ouch! Yu Zhuqiuan exclaimed. She did not expect that her first attack would be blocked. She immediately turned back and executed her lightness skill to avoid the attack. She saw that she was in the air and said, "Ren Xiaoyao, I didn't expect you to have some skills. You actually hid some of your strength." Before her voice died away, the long sword in her hand was thrust towards Zhang Xiaohua's throat. "Haha, it's more than just some skills. You see, I, Xiaoxia, will definitely not let you go back today." Ha ha ha, a laugh more arrogant than Zhang Xiaohua sounded. "If you want to take my life, then I'm not looking down on you. You still have to practice for 100 years. The long sword was like frost, and it flashed with sword light. Yu Zhuqiuan held the long sword in her hand and raised her spirit. She used her exquisite sword skill and stabbed towards Zhang Xiaohua's body. Zhang Xiaohua laughed inwardly. Holding the heavy sword in his hand, he also used the nameless sword skill skillfully and blocked the attacks. Zhang Xiaohua's sword skill was not as good as Yu Zhuqiuan's, but his strength was great. As long as Yu Zhuqiuan's long sword touched the heavy sword, even if there was a slight distance between it and the heavy sword, it would immediately be swept away. After a few moves, Yu Zhuqiuan no longer had the idea of fighting force with force. She only looked for flaws in Zhang Xiaohua's sword skills. After fighting for a while, Zhang Xiaohua was getting impatient. He was an immortal qi practitioner, and sword skills were not his forte. With his great strength, he could only bully ordinary people. Although it was not difficult to deal with Yu Zhuqiuan, it would take time. He heard from Zhang Pinger that it was best not to stay in the Ghost Valley for too long. He still had to pick the ghost face mushrooms. It was unreasonable to waste time here with Yu Zhuqiuan. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua stabbed the heavy sword into the ground and took out Chasing Dream from his chest. "Ha ha!" Yu Zhuqiuan saw this and laughed loudly. "There's that brat. Is your sword skill not a match for this young master? You actually took out a little girl's small sword. Looks like you really are. You're someone from the Tenryus sect?" Yu Zhuqiuan was mocking him at first, but when he saw the chasing dream dagger rise into the air and fly towards his throat like a nimble little snake, he finally came to his senses and cried out, "This!" After that, he didn't say anything else and immediately leaped backwards, looking as if he was about to escape. Zhang Xiaohua was also very surprised. He thought to himself, "This Yu Zhuqiuan is quite a character." Once he saw the flying sword, he immediately knew that he was no match for it. He was not willing to stay any longer. Unfortunately, since Yu Zhuqiuan already had the intention to kill Zhang Xiaohua, and Zhang Xiaohua had also taken out his flying sword, how could there be any room for reconciliation between the two of them? Zhang Xiaohua rode on the wind, and in the blink of an eye, she overtook Yu Zhuqiuan. She pointed her finger, and the chasing dream was still stabbing towards his throat. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua flying in the air and blocking in front of him, Yu Zhuqiuan was not surprised and quickly used his long sword to block the flying sword. However, the flying sword was like a meteor and he could not block it at all. After blocking a few moves, it cut open a wound on his forehead. Since this was the case, Yu Zhuqiuan did not dare to stay any longer. He gritted his teeth and reached into his chest and took out an unknown item. He shook his hand and threw it towards Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua was releasing her divine sense and saw clearly that it was a light golden jade talisman. How does this guy have an immortal jade talisman? Zhang Xiaohua could not help but be shocked. Even Peacock and Chun Chen don't have it. How did he? But at this time, the jade talisman was already in front of her. Zhang Xiaohua did not have time to think and immediately reached into her chest and grabbed a defensive jade talisman. Without waiting for her hand to take it out, she crushed it. The golden jade talisman that Yu Zhuqiuan threw was in front of Zhang Xiaohua and suddenly exploded. With a sizzle sound, dozens of golden dots sprang out, and these golden dots grew with the wind. In a flash, they turned into dozens of golden long swords and uniformly covered Zhang Xiaohua's head. Good. What kind of offensive jade talisman is this? Zhang Xiaohua thought as she rode on the wind, trying to escape the attack range of the golden long swords. Zhang Xiaohua's imperial wind technique could not be said to be slow, but just as she escaped the attack of the long swords immediately changed their direction and stabbed toward Zhang Xiaohua, who had already escaped to the side. At this time, the jade talisman that Zhang Xiaohua had just crushed also took effect. A light green light shield also rose around Zhang Xiaohua, but Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to be careless. She still released her divine sense and carefully observed. Moreover, her other hand was still in her chest and did not take it out. As expected, when the golden long swords pierced into Zhang Xiaohua's light green light shield, the light shield shook for a while. When the golden long swords were destroyed, the light shield also dimmed a lot. But after a few more long swords pierced in, the light shield was about to be destroyed. Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to be careless. She crushed another defensive jade talisman, and another light shield appeared not far away. Yu Zhuqiuan threw out her jade talisman. She did not stop and continued to run. However, as she ran, she stole a glance behind her. She saw Zhang Xiaohua being attacked by the golden longsword and was somewhat flustered. A trace of joy appeared on her face. The dimming of the light shield made her stop in her tracks. But when he saw another light shield rise, he did not dare to stay any longer and turned to run. When Zhang Xiaohua saw that the defensive light shield was effective, she could not help but feel relieved. She still had a lot of jade talismans with her. Why should she be afraid of him? Hence, she looked at Yu Zhuqiuan, who was running away. This guy knows how to behave. Zhang Xiaohua cursed inwardly. He floated up again and chased after them, completely ignoring the golden long swords that were chasing after him. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was blocking his way again, Yu Zhuqiuan narrowed his eyes. He did not reply and turned in another direction. Unfortunately, after a few more times, Zhang Xiaohua crushed a few more defensive jade talismans. The golden long swords disappeared and Yu Zhuqiuan stopped. Seeing the light green light shield around Zhang Xiaohua, Yu Zhuqiuan knew that Zhang Xiaohua had crushed more than one jade talisman. His face turned pale. You really want my life? Yu Zhuqiuan stared at Zhang Xiaohua and asked, unwilling to give up. He, do you think you still have a way out? Zhang Xiaohua replied coldly. But if you let me go, I will give you endless benefits. Zhang Pinger, I will never fight with you again. Yu Zhuqiuan's voice became softer and softer. Zhang Xiaohua did not reply. She pointed her finger, and the flying sword attacked again. Yu Zhuqiuan sighed softly. Her fingers exerted force, and the thing she had prepared in her hand was crushed in an instant. A yellow defensive light shield immediately protected her within it. It was the same as what Vice Hall Master Su of the Pill Tower Hall had used previously. Haha! Zhang Xiaohua laughed loudly. He pointed with his finger, and the flying sword stopped in the air. Zhang Xiaohua took out a few light red jade talismans from his bosom and struck them on Yu Zhuqiuan's light barrier with crackling sounds. Immediately, several places were set ablaze, and the light barrier was as thin as paper. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Yu Zhuqiuan without the slightest bit of pity. His finger moved slightly, and the chasing dream immediately pierced the light barrier like lightning. With a light pop, the earthen yellow light barrier was destroyed, and the chasing dream pierced Yu Zhuqiuan's throat. Yu Zhuqiuan screamed at the top of his lungs. Ren Xiaoyao, why do you want to kill me? My master is Jing Gang. She won't forgive you. -4. Chapter 848. Jing Gang. Zhang Xiaohua curled his lips. Zhu Meng did not even pause for a moment and immediately touched Yu Zhuqiuan's throat. A dark red dot flashed. After that, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said to Yu Zhuqiuan, Who is Jing Gang? How would I know? Not to mention Jing Gang, even if it was Li Gang or Wang Gang, since you have offended this Xiaoxia. Do you think I will spare you? Yu Zhuqiuan's throat was pierced, and he was about to die. However, when he heard Zhang Xiaohua's words, his eyes, which had already rolled back, showed an expression of disbelief and unwillingness. It was as if he was surprised that Zhang Xiaohua did not know who Jing Gang was, and also as if he was extremely sad that he had died so mysteriously. When Yu Zhuqiuan fell to the ground with a myriad of thoughts, Zhang Xiaohua took out a jade talisman and hid it on Yu Zhuqiuan's corpse. A flame immediately appeared and burned the corpse until there was no trace left. What is this? Could it be that this guy has something good on him? Zhang Xiaohua kicked the spot where the flames had burned to see if there were any traces left behind. However, when he kicked it, he heard a crisp sound. When he took a closer look, he saw that it was a golden phoenix hairpin. Zhang Xiaohua knew that the flame in the jade talisman was extremely domineering. It could burn anything in the mortal world. Only immortal weapons and the like could not be destroyed. When he held the phoenix hairpin in his hand and scanned it with his divine sense, he felt that the fluctuations within were obscure. His divine sense seemed to have been repelled by some kind of restriction. He was overjoyed and thought to himself, So this guy is here to deliver a treasure to me. After putting away the golden hairpin, Zhang Xiaohua looked carefully again. After confirming that there were no traces left, he turned around and walked along the faint mountain path, preparing to walk down the gentle slope. Moreover, the peacock in the refining heart cave had already lost its mind. It only wanted to live the happy life in its heart. If it was so intoxicated, in the end the peacock would definitely completely lose its mind. It would only know how to live in this illusion. After the successor selection, it would become a walking corpse. There would never be a moment of clarity again. In the dreamscape, Peacock was sitting beside a lotus pond with her child to cool off the heat. Unintentionally, Peacock glanced at the surface of the pond that reflected the stars. Then, as if she had lost something, she immediately raised her head and stared blankly at the stars in the sky. No matter how her husband, her child, and even her father and mother cried for her, Peacock did not respond. She just stared blankly at the stars. Under the watchful eyes of the peacock, the starlight that filled the sky no longer changed. There was no more moon, no more stars, no more alternating between the sun and moon, no more changing between day and night. After an unknown amount of time, the peacock let out a long cry that shook the 9 heavens. That long cry was like a hurricane, stirring up all the scenes and people around the peacock into the sky. Finally, there was a crisp cracking sound, like a broken mirror, and all the scenes were fragmented into fragments, revealing the sky full of stars that the peacock saw in the beginning. Seeing this scene, Peacock had a slight realization. At the same time, a layer of cold sweat broke out on her back. She did not know how long she had been in the refining heart cave, but it was obvious that when she entered the cave, she was immediately trapped in the dreamscape. It was only now that she was able to escape from the dreamscape by chance. When she thought of this, Peacock felt lucky. She couldn't help but think, thank goodness. As the saying goes, demons are born from the heart. This dreamscape can actually read one's inner demons. It is truly powerful and impossible to guard against. But if I didn't stop it... Just as Peacock thought of this, the scenery around her immediately changed. Peacock's body was about to fall again. Peacock was shocked. She did not dare to delay and quickly sat down on the ground. Her mind was clear and her heart was facing the sky. She silently chanted the Mortal Heart Sutra, trying to get rid of the inner demons that were about to appear. Peacock's method was effective. When her inner energy circulated in her body, when she opened her eyes, the scenery around her had returned to normal. Seeing that the Mortal Heart Sutra was effective, Peacock was overjoyed. She did not get up and continued to circulate her inner energy for 36 cycles. When Peacock opened her eyes again, the scenery in front of her was still the same. Perhaps this is not the key to breaking the formation. Seeing that the Mortal Heart Sutra did not work, Peacock immediately understood that just sitting down was not the key to breaking the formation. If this was the way to break the formation, her master would have told her before entering the cave. Just as Peacock thought of her master, in the starry sky, the image of Abbess Jing Fan appeared. That image said lovingly, "Peacock, demons are born from the heart. By guarding the heart, you can only prevent the inner demons from appearing. It is not enough to kill the inner demons. Only by opening your heart and releasing the inner demons can you truly kill the inner demons." As soon as she finished speaking, the image turned into specks of light and disappeared. Peacock, who already knew the power of the dreamscape in the Smelting Heart Cave, could not believe what she just heard. She stood up and pulled out the soft sword at her waist. Step by step, she carefully walked in the air. She did not know how long she walked. Perhaps it was an hour, perhaps it was a few hours. Peacock's surroundings remained the same. Sigh, when will this dreamscape end? It is so much more powerful than the Chimin 3 talents formation that I have seen before. Just as Peacock thought of the Chimin 3 talents formation, the scene in front of her changed. It was the scene when Peacock was attacked by the trio when she returned from Rejuvenation Valley. When the trio saw Peacock in the dreamscape, they all brandished their swords and pounced on her. Peacock knew that these were all illusions, but she did not know whether she should raise her sword to meet the attack. When the saber was so close, Peacock could not take it any longer and raised her sword to meet the attack. Kacha! It was the sound of sword and saber clashing. The sound was so real that it caused Peacock to break out in cold sweat. She did not dare to imagine what would have happened if she had not raised her sword to meet the attack. Peacock fought with the trio in the dreamscape for half a day. As Peacock returned to the Smelting Heart sect, she immediately consumed the Minor Pulse Nourishing Pill, and her powers increased tremendously. Peacock paid the price of heavy injuries and successfully killed the trio. Just as the trio was killed by Peacock, the scene in front of her changed again, and they were still at the same place. Peacock's injuries were all gone. How did this happen? Peacock inspected her surroundings and shook her head. The dreamscape is so powerful. How can I pass through it? Maybe only by mastering the Mortal Heart technique to the Heavenly Tao can I break through it. Just as the thought came to her mind, the stars in the sky suddenly twinkled. Then a tall and skinny figure appeared in the middle of the starry sky. He was walking slowly, and his eyes were fixed on Peacock. He stepped on the void and walked towards her. Rin Xiaoyao. Peacock looked at the unfamiliar yet familiar figure in disbelief and blurted out. Rin Xiaoyao walked in the void and blocked out all the sights. He was the only figure in the entire world. It was just like how Peacock felt when she first saw Zhang Xiaohua. He filled up the entire world. Rin Xiaoyao took a few steps forward, and in a moment he was in front of Peacock. Peacock stared at him, dumbfounded, looking at the man who seemed to be slightly taller than himself, but felt that he was taller than the sky. He couldn't even say a word. Peacock, you're wrong. Very wrong. Ren Xiaoyao opened his mouth. It was the voice that Peacock had heard before. I am not Ren Xiaoyao. I am the heavenly axiom. It is the heavenly axiom that you have cultivated the heart of mortal mantra and have been pursuing. Now I am in front of you. Didn't you miss me? I'm here. You. What are you still standing there for? Rin Xiaoyao said with a smile. His eyes, which were as bright as stars, stared at the Peacock without blinking. Is that so? Then should I call you Rin Xiaoyao or Heavenly Tao? Peacock smiled and took a step forward. Either is fine. Ren Xiaoyao is the Heavenly Tao, and the Heavenly Tao is Rin Xiaoyao. You can call me whatever you want. Haha. Peacock waved her hand, and the flexible sword in her hand pierced Rin Xiaoyao's chest. With a swoosh, Ren Xiaoyao immediately transformed into a flowing cloud that dispersed into the starry sky and vanished without a trace. At the same time, a tall and thin figure appeared in the distance. He smiled and said, Peacock, why are you so cruel? I came to see you, and this is how you treat me? Then, with a wave of his hand, the scene changed again. It was a grassy plain. Ren Xiaoyao walked in front of Peacock and sat down. He smiled and said, Even if I am not the heavenly Tao that you have been pursuing, but I am your nemesis. If you don't end this, how can you pass the selection? Peacock stared at Rin Xiaoyao and walked closer. She still held the long sword in her hand. When she was close enough, Peacock did not answer. She raised the sword and stabbed. This time, Peacock did not get what she wanted. Rin Xiaoyao stretched out his finger and pinched Peacock's flexible sword. He smiled and said, Is this how you treat your nemesis? Then he stretched out his other hand and scratched Peacock's face. He sniffed and said, Senior Peacock's face smells so good. I wonder what kind of powder you use. Peacock's face was burning. She tried to snatch the flexible sword back, but Rin Xiaoyao loosened his finger, and the flexible sword returned to Peacock's hand. Peacock did not hesitate after receiving the flexible sword. She used her movement skills and attacked Rin Xiaoyao. Senior Peacock, what are you doing? Are you trying to murder your husband? Ren Xiaoyao asked shamelessly. How could Peacock answer this? Even if she knew it was an illusion, she would not answer. Peacock kept her mouth shut and used all her skills, but she could not hurt Ren Xiaoyao at all. Every time Peacock attacked, Ren Xiaoyao would casually dodge and almost snatch Peacock's sword away from her. Peacock saw that her soft sword did not work. She was embarrassed and angry. She stood aside, panting heavily, her beautiful eyes glaring fiercely at Rin Xiaoyao, who was casually sitting on the ground again. -4. Chapter 849. Zhang Xiaohua went down the slope. She didn't know if it was because of the low terrain, but there was more ghost fog in the valley below the slope. Correspondingly, there were more and more short trees and mushrooms. Zhang Xiaohua held her breath and circulated the worry-free sutra in her body. Although there was a lot of ghost fog, it was still in the form of silk. Occasionally, it would float over Zhang Xiaohua's body. It only caused a little numbness, but it didn't cause any substantial harm to Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua went down the path at the bottom of the valley. She collected a lot of strange herbs and mushrooms, but she didn't encounter anything strange. The further down they went, the more luxuriant the plants on the lingering fragrance peak grew. Gradually, They blocked out the little sunlight. Coupled with the increase of the ghost fog, the place slowly became damp and cold. Although Zhang Xiaohua was immune to both heat and cold, she could still sense that this place was not friendly. However, Zhang Xiaohua released his divine sense and scanned the surroundings, but he did not find anything out of the ordinary. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua's heart trembled. Usually the forest was filled with the chirping of birds, but the ghost valley was so quiet that it was scary. There wasn't even a bird chirping, let alone a small creature like a squirrel. Pricking up her ears, Zhang Xiaohua listened carefully. Above her head, there was some faint chirping of birds, but they were very far away. If it wasn't for Zhang Xiaohua's extraordinary hearing, she definitely wouldn't have heard it. Ghost Valley, is this how it is called? Zhang Xiaohua frowned slightly. Do I still have to go down? Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but hesitate. He wasn't interested in becoming an inner disciple of alchemy. So what if he didn't pass this so-called martial arts test? What's going on? Zhang Xiaohua inadvertently looked down and saw some small holes in her sleeves. This set of clothes seems to have been changed when we left Shishing Peak. How did it tear so quickly? Zhang Xiaohua was very puzzled. She looked at the other sleeve, and it was the same. That's not right. Even if it's worn out, there shouldn't be so many tiny holes. At this moment, another wisp of ghostly fog floated past Zhang Xiaohua and collided with his sleeve. The ghostly fog rushed up his sleeve and disappeared. The originally small holes on his sleeve were now much bigger. So it's because of this ghost fog. When she thought of this, Zhang Xiaohua immediately tilted her head to the side to avoid the oncoming ghost fog. Looks like this ghost fog is very corrosive. If I absorb it into my body, I'm afraid that my internal organs will be destroyed. Forget it, I should turn around. The front looks like it's filled with fog. How can I go down there? Don't be naked later. It'll be embarrassing. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to retreat. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua felt a slight movement in front of her chest. Oh no, my clothes are already torn. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. When she lowered her head, she saw some movement in her clothes. Zhang Xiaohua reached into her clothes and took out the two living creatures hidden inside. She saw that Goldie, who was wrapped in a shell of keystone, was slowly swaying its tail and moving its four little legs. As for Blackie, it was still motionless. Zhang Xiaohua placed Blackie back into her clothes and held Goldie in her hands. Goldie's little head was twisting up and down as though it was extremely uncomfortable. Zhang Xiaohua took it out of the keystone. Goldie immediately stretched lazily in Zhang Xiaohua's hands, but it still didn't open its eyes. Is it going to wake up? Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself. At this moment, a few wisps of ghost fog floated past Zhang Xiaohua's hand. Zhang Xiaohua was afraid that she would hurt Goldie, so she moved her hand away. However, Goldie sniffed and raised its head. It sniffed at the wisps of ghost fog that floated past it. Goldie let out a soft snort, and an extremely weak white light shot out and sucked in the wisps of ghost fog. It was extremely similar to how black is sucked in the black worms in Yan's Naiwan Palace. After it sucked in the black fog, Goldie shook its head. It sniffed and continued to search for more. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, she was overjoyed. Huang Feng left in a hurry and didn't tell Zhang Xiaohua what Goldie wanted to eat. Zhang Xiaohua was vexed that she had to be a wet nurse. However, Goldie and Blackie were still unconscious. Perhaps they were relying on keystones to survive. Zhang Xiaohua thought that they would be unconscious for 100 years and that she would never be able to see them wake up in this lifetime. When Zhang Xiaohua saw that Goldie could actually absorb the ghostly mist, as if it was feeding on it, it would naturally grow if it ate more. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua immediately gave up on the idea of turning back. Holding Goldie in his hands, he slowly made his way down. Previously, Zhang Xiaohua had been avoiding the ghost fog, but now she was heading towards the place with the most ghost fog. Goldie was also amazing. The white light from its nose was very mysterious. It didn't care how much of the black fog there was. With just a puff, the black fog was sucked in like a whale sucking in water, leaving nothing behind. The valley below the gentle slope was extremely long. Zhang Xiaohua walked for the time it took for 3 incense sticks to burn, but she still hadn't reached the end, because she was holding Goldie in one hand. Zhang Xiaohua only used her other hand to form a seal and pluck a large amount of herbs. As for the black fog at the bottom of the valley, most of it was sucked into Goldie's stomach. Only a small amount of it remained floating in the air because Zhang Xiaohua was too lazy to chase after it. "Why aren't you full yet?" Seeing that Goldie had already sucked in a lot of the black fog, Zhang Xiaohua was almost afraid that Goldie would be bloated. However, when she saw that Goldie's stomach was still not bloated, Zhang Xiaohua said without hesitation, "Fortunately, this fellow eats fog. It's similar to drinking wind and dew. Otherwise, wouldn't I be broke from eating like this?" Just as she was thinking, a huge cloud of black fog floated over. Zhang Xiaohua quickly raised her left hand and welcomed it. Goldie sucked in a breath and finished it. Then, Zhang Xiaohua retracted her left hand and looked around again. Before Zhang Xiaohua could find anything, she suddenly felt something strange. It was as though something was spying on her. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. She quickly released her divine sense, but there was still nothing alive within a 1 zhang radius. She looked around vigilantly, but there was nothing. Why is that? Just as Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled, his eyes inadvertently fell on his left hand. He saw a pair of small eyes staring at him without blinking. Wasn't that Xiao Huang, who had been unconscious all this time? Ah! Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. She knew how powerful Huang Feng was. Back then, she only wanted to raise Goldie and Blacka, but she didn't think about how they would treat her. Now that Goldie had woken up, her first reaction was, "Don't tell me this fellow is like its mother? Let me catch it." However, when Zhang Xiaohua saw the longing, joy, and hope in Goldie's clear eyes, she couldn't help but tear up. A feeling that she had never experienced before filled her heart. It was as though this little thing was an indispensable part of her life. She just wanted to put everything in front of it, to see it happy, to see it enjoy itself. Almost without hesitation, Zhang Xiaohua held Goldie in front of her eyes and reached out with her right hand, gently stroking Goldie's fur. Goldie enjoyed it very much. It lay there comfortably, its large tail wagging up and down. Then Goldie flipped over and hugged Zhang Xiaohua's right hand with all 4 of its legs. It used its tongue to lick Zhang Xiaohua's fingers, just like a naughty child kissing its father's palm. This child is so naughty. The 18-year-old Zhang Xiaohua couldn't understand the feelings of a father, but he couldn't help but laugh. When Goldie heard that, it flipped over and stood up. It did not seem to be as weak as it was when it was born. It used its 2 hind legs and tail to support its body. It waved its 2 front paws up and down, but its eyes flashed with a coquettish look. At the same time, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly had a feeling that he understood Goldie's words. "Mother, you're the naughty one." "Mother." Zhang Xiaohua staggered and almost fell. "Am I mistaken? Is this a hallucination? I know Goldie's voice, and it's actually calling me mother." Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's shocked expression, Goldie's face was innocent and full of concern. "Child, how am I your mother?" "I'm your father." Zhang Xiaohua laughed, but then Zhang Xiaohua burst out laughing. How could I be your father?" Goldie didn't seem to know anything about being a father or a mother. It only flipped up and down in Zhang Xiaohua's hand. After a while, it seemed to be able to move its arms and legs. It immediately waved its tail and climbed onto Zhang Xiaohua's head. It used its tongue to lick Zhang Xiaohua's face all over. As it licked, it acted like a spoiled child. Zhang Xiaohua felt as though it was calling out to her, "Mother!" She smiled bitterly. Zhang Xiaohua felt very helpless. Although she was gratified that Goldie was acting like a spoiled child, her face was still wet and she felt very uncomfortable. Zhang Xiaohua carefully placed Goldie back into her left hand, but not long after, it flew onto Zhang Xiaohua's head again. It didn't lick Zhang Xiaohua's hair so much that it made a mess. What should I do? Zhang Xiaohua was helpless. She thought of something and said, Goldie, are you still hungry? Let's continue eating. As she spoke, she reached out to take Goldie down. However, when Goldie heard her words, it stood up on Zhang Xiaohua's head and pointed its claws forward, chirping incessantly. Zhang Xiaohua immediately understood. Mother, I'm hungry. Let's go. Defeated, Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. It seemed like she could no longer escape from this mother. Perhaps in the future, when Xiaohuang grew up, it would be able to use the book Shuawen Jiezi to enlighten it. Perhaps it would understand. Hence, Zhang Xiaohua didn't take Goldie from the top of her head. Instead, she walked straight to the bottom of the valley. -4. Chapter 850. Li Chui Valley had never seen such a spectacle before. A tall and skinny young man with a palm-sized yellow marten on his head walked forward while looking around. When he saw something that caught his eye, he immediately waved his hand. Not long after, that thing seemed to be pulled by an invisible rope and flew into the young man's hand. That thing just spun in the young man's hand and disappeared without a trace. What was even more amazing was that the yellow marten on the young man's head, no matter how the young man walked, it stood steadily on the young man's head and did not sway at all. That young man was also different from the previous disciples who entered the valley. He only looked for places with a lot of black fog. As long as the young man walked in front of the black fog, the little marten would raise its head and poke its small nose forward. A white brilliance flashed, and the black fog was immediately sucked into the little marten's nose. Looking behind the young man, sure enough, there was only a small amount of black fog floating around. It seemed that it was all sucked away by the little marten. The one who caused the spectacle was Zhang Xiaohua and her Goldie. Although the Li Chui Valley was long, there was an end after all. When Goldie had sucked away all the black fog in the valley, Zhang Xiaohua also walked to the end of the Li Chui Valley. She saw that the bottom of the valley was a semicircular mountain wall. As the black fog was sucked away, its original appearance had long been revealed. This mountain wall was different from usual. It had long been terrifyingly dark. When she touched it with her hand, it actually felt like it was cast from iron. However, on this stone wall, there were a variety of plants that were half a foot tall. These plants were roughly the same as the ones that Zhang Xiaohua picked previously. However, at a glance, it was obvious that they were very old. Were they not hundreds of years old? Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. Looking around, she formed a seal in her hand and picked them one by one. It took nearly half a meal's time to sweep everything clean. Among them, there were a few so-called ghost face mushrooms. Although they were very old, they were still a distance away from being 1,000 years old. However, Zhang Xiaohua believed that as long as she handed in the ghost face mushrooms of this age, she would definitely pass. It was true that Mei Sujin wanted to make things difficult for Zhang Xiaohua, but if she really managed to pick all the ghost-faced mushrooms that were rarely seen in the Ghost Valley, then she would have nothing to say. But don't forget, the one in charge of the distant fire hall was still the hall master, and not some third senior sister. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua looked up and down again, afraid that he might have missed something. Just as he was about to turn back, he heard a burst of chatter above his head. There's still a way inside? Little Huang, are you kidding me? This is the bottom of the valley. There's no road ahead. Zhang Xiaohua was amused. This little thing must be addicted to eating. Little Huang jumped down from Zhang Xiaohua's head and stood on a protruding piece of the stone wall. First, it sniffed with its nose, then it raised its claws and scratched the stone wall a few times. The seemingly solid stone wall was immediately scratched by Little Huang. Then Little Huang stuck out its nose and pressed it against the stone wall. With a flash of white light, it forcefully sucked out a few wisps of black fog from the stone wall. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. His purpose in coming to the Li Chui Valley was to pick the ghost face mushrooms. He didn't care about the origin of the black fog. At this moment, seeing Little Huang's actions, he suddenly realized that the ghost fog actually seeped out from the stone wall. Could it be that there's another world in this stone wall? Zhang Xiaohua thought to himself. Squeak, squeak. Without absorbing the ghost fog, little Huang seemed to be a little impatient. It jumped up and down on the stone wall. Zhang Xiaohua's heart kept feeling, "Mother, mother," sigh. Zhang Xiaohua was very helpless. If it was someone else, they wouldn't be able to do it. However, this wasn't a problem for Zhang Xiaohua. After thinking for a while, he took out a piece of jade and crushed it. A light green defensive barrier enveloped Zhang Xiaohua. Then, Zhang Xiaohua held the heavy sword in one hand and waved his hand. Little Huang immediately jumped happily onto Zhang Xiaohua's head. Then he formed a seal, and Zhang Xiaohua rushed into the stone wall, as if there was an invisible door there. It was dark inside the stone wall, and one couldn't distinguish the direction clearly. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense couldn't reach far, so of course his eyes were dark. Fortunately, he had little Huang on his head. Under little Huang's guidance, he directly slanted upwards. After some time, there was an empty space in front of him. He had escaped to a cave. Before Zhang Xiaohua could do anything, little Huang jumped up and down on his head. Its nose kept snorting. Rays of white light flashed and sucked in a lot of the black fog. After Zhang Xiaohua stood still and released his divine sense, he couldn't help but be shocked. This was a mountain path that was only about the height of a person. There was an extremely thick ghost fog in the mountain path. Compared to the ghost fog in the Ghost Valley, it was simply very clean. The ghost fog here was also more corrosive. The defensive barrier that Zhang Xiaohua cast in advance had already begun to corrode in the black fog. Where is this? Why is there so much ghost fog? Zhang Xiaohua was a little puzzled. When he raised his head to look ahead, there seemed to be some light through the dark ghost fog. At this moment, the ghost fog at the end of the mountain path had been completely sucked in by little Huang. Thinking that this black fog was very satisfying, little Huang unconsciously used its little claws to hammer its chest. It also pulled Zhang Xiaohua's hair and anxiously moved forward. Soon, soon. Zhang Xiaohua understood little Huang's meaning. She only said that with her mouth. Once again, she used her divine sense to look ahead and raised the great wisdom sword in front of her. Zhang Xiaohua walked very slowly. On one hand, the path was a little bumpy. On the other hand, she let little Huang suck with all his might. Zhang Xiaohua also knew that the black fog in the Ghost Valley was very rare. If it wasn't for Mei Suqin deliberately making things difficult, she wouldn't have found such a place for little Huang to suck. And little Huang's way of sucking was definitely very beneficial to its growth. Zhang Xiaohua walked for a while and her eyes lit up. It was a circular space. On the empty stone wall, there were a few luminous pearls. In front of the stone wall, there were two paths. One gradually led downwards. The other gradually led upwards. For some reason, the path leading upwards didn't have much black fog, but the path leading downwards had a lot of black fog. Without any hesitation, Zhang Xiaohua led little Huang down the mountain path. Every once in a while, there would be a luminous pearl used to light up the path. However, under the black fog, there wasn't much use. As Zhang Xiaohua went deeper, the black fog became thicker and little Huang's sucking speed slowed down. The light barrier around Zhang Xiaohua's body was almost completely corroded. She crushed another piece of jade, and the light green light barrier was restored to its original state. Just as Zhang Xiaohua finished setting up the defensive barrier, he heard a shrill cry coming from afar, and it pounced on him. Ah! Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. She immediately stopped and raised her sword in front of her chest. Little Huang, on the other hand, was stunned for a moment. Then it was overjoyed. Its nose twitched as if it had smelled the most delicious thing in the world. Just as Zhang Xiaohua raised her sword, she felt the black fog in front of her tumbling. She didn't look carefully and saw a white object flying towards her. Zhang Xiaohua didn't hesitate to stab at the white object. The white object didn't dodge and stabbed at the center. However, the white object was like the black fog and the sword missed. Shit! Zhang Xiaohua didn't have time to dodge and quickly retreated. Ji. Little Huang was unhappy when it saw Zhang Xiaohua retreating. It tugged at its hair in protest. Although Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat, he didn't dare to place all his hopes on this little thing that had just woken up. He reached out and took out Chasing Dream. With a wave of his hand, Chasing Dream flew out. The white thing immediately chased after it and collided with Chasing Dream. Unfortunately, Chasing Dream missed and flew past the white thing. At this moment, the thing had already flown close. With a bang, it pounced on the defensive light barrier. The light barrier swayed twice and dimmed. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua could clearly see that the white thing was indeed an object. A white object that was similar to the black fog and looked like snot. The white object stuck to the light barrier and flew back with a shrill sound. Then, like before, it slammed into the light barrier. Little Huang, on Zhang Xiaohua's head, moved at this moment. It swung its tail and floated in front of Zhang Xiaohua, blocking the white object. It snorted, and the white light covered the white object. That thing did not know fear. It was only when the white light caught it and dragged it towards Goldie's nose that it realized it was in danger. It immediately retreated. It struggled for a moment, but Goldie's white light was powerless. It easily escaped. Then that thing changed its angle and continued to crash into the light barrier. Although Goldie's movements were fast, it still could not catch up to that unknown white thing. Bang! Another sound rang out, and the light green barrier was immediately shattered. That thing seemed to have smelled something good, and it sped towards Zhang Xiaohua's body again. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua was prepared. Before the white object could get close, she crushed the jade talisman in her hand, and another light barrier appeared, blocking it outside the light barrier. At the same time, Goldie also flew over. An array of light enveloped the white thing. Unfortunately, little Huang had just woken up and was still young. Although it seemed to be the white object's nemesis, the difference in strength was too great. The white object only needed to move slightly to the side, and it escaped. Little Huang was furious. It seemed to have lost face in front of its mother. With a roll, it chased after the white object. The white object didn't run far. It quickly returned and slammed into Zhang Xiaohua's light barrier. What should we do? Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself. -4. Chapter 851. Zhang Xiaohua watched as Goldie failed to absorb the white thing, and the white thing continued to ram into her defensive barrier. Although the defensive barrier was effective against the black fog, it only took a few hits for it to shatter. The Prajna heavy sword and Chasing Dream dagger were both ineffective, and the dragon binding hoop was probably useless as well. Zhang Xiaohua could only turn her attention to the offensive jade talismans. After all, she didn't know how to use the newly acquired small shield, small mirror, and the golden hairpin. Even the bracelet with 36 beads on her wrist could only be used as a decoration. Zhang Xiaohua had already made up her mind. If the fire talisman didn't work, then she would turn around and run. Goldie had already absorbed quite a bit of the black fog, so letting it eat its fill would be worthy of it calling her mother. Reaching out, Zhang Xiaohua grabbed a fire talisman and threw it out. It flew in front of the white thing, and with a paw sound, a cluster of flames rose up and landed on the white thing's body. To Zhang Xiaohua's delight, the spot where the heavy sword and the small sword had missed was actually burned a small hole by the flame. Unfortunately, the flame only lasted for a moment, and the small hole also disappeared. Good. Zhang Xiaohua cried out in her heart. Since it was able to burn a small hole, it proved that it was effective. Although it wasn't powerful enough, it was still better than hitting nothing. The flame appeared and was immediately extinguished. The white thing seemed to be stunned for a moment and hesitated for a moment. However, it immediately let out a mournful sound and flew toward Zhang Xiaohua. It seemed that this thing had been thirsty for a long time, and no one knew how many years it had been since a flesh and blood person had come here. Now that it had seen it for the first time, it had already lost its mind. Well, That was on the premise that this white thing had intelligence. As expected, that thing did not have any intelligence. Zhang Xiaohua continued to crush defensive jade talismans, evade with the wind, and hit the white thing with fire talismans. The fire talismans were not powerful enough, but there were many of them. When Zhang Xiaohua was free, she would often use these talismans to practice. Therefore, after a short while, the white thing became thinner, and the force with which it hit the light barrier was much weaker. Gradually, it lost its threat to Zhang Xiaohua. Goldie didn't stay idle either. It kept using its white light to cover that thing, and the time that thing stayed there grew longer and longer. Ha ha! Zhang Xiaohua chuckled as she watched the white thing's strength gradually diminish. It was still chattering nonstop, not knowing how to retreat. I don't know what this thing is, but it's actually so powerful. Luckily, I'm the one who came in. If it were anyone else, wouldn't they have lost their lives? But how did it kill? Did it turn them into minced meat? With that thought in mind, Zhang Xiaohua threw out another handful of fire talismans. Boom! The talismans burned many huge holes in the white thing. When the flames were extinguished, the holes disappeared, and the white thing was as thin as a black fog, but its color was white. Goldie saw this and didn't hesitate anymore. It rushed forward and snorted. A light that was thicker than before enveloped the white thing. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned when she saw this. When did Goldie learn to be so cunning? Is this still the little thing that just woke up? This time, Goldie's light was stronger. Once the white thing was sucked in, no matter how hard it struggled, it was useless. Gradually, a wisp of white was sucked out of the white thing by the light and entered Goldie's nose. Following that, more and more white was sucked out. At that moment, the white thing seemed to have realized that it was in danger and struggled to escape. Unfortunately, it was too late. More and more of the white substance was removed from its body by Goldie. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the white thing was completely sucked into Goldie's stomach. Gigi! Goldie let out a satisfied sound and flew back to Zhang Xiaohua's head. It stretched lazily as though it was enjoying its meal. Do we still want to go forward? Zhang Xiaohua asked herself again. However, even though Zhang Xiaohua couldn't think, Goldie understood. It used its claws to tug on Zhang Xiaohua's hair. Zhang Xiaohua immediately understood. I haven't eaten enough. What? Zhang Xiaohua was extremely surprised. This time, he wasn't surprised by Goldie's appetite. Instead, he was thinking that if Goldie could read his thoughts, then what privacy would he have in front of it in the future? Even though it was just a little thing that couldn't speak, but he was still unhappy about it. Sai, let's talk about it later. Zhang Xiaohua only thought about it. He didn't know what to do. Who knew how Goldie could communicate with him mentally? Zhang Xiaohua still had a lot of jade talismans in his money pouch, so he wasn't too worried. Thus, he held the heavy sword upside down and held a few fire talismans in his hand as he continued forward. Luckily, there was nothing else on this mountain path other than the white thing from before. Goldie also absorbed the black fog as much as it wanted until it arrived in front of a stone door. There was nothing strange about it at all. It was an extremely ordinary stone door, but it was also extremely strange. It was ordinary because it was the same shape as the courtyard doors and doors that Zhang Xiaohua had seen before. It felt as though it could be opened with a push. It was strange because the entire stone door was emitting a faint blood-red color. It was very different from the dark green color of the stone walls on the mountain path. Zhang Xiaohua didn't hesitate to think that there must be something extremely dangerous behind this stone door. However, the stone door wasn't completely closed. There was a small gap on the side of the door. The thick black fog in the mountain path floated out from this small gap. The black fog in the mountain path had been mostly sucked in by Goldie. It had returned to its original appearance. Under the luminous pearl, the black fog could be seen flying out from the gap. Goldie jumped down from Zhang Xiaohua's head and leaped to the front of the stone door. It greedily sucked in a few times before it snuck in through the gap. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked when he saw this. He shouted, "Be good, Goldie!" Suddenly, Goldie's little head popped out from the gap before it disappeared again. Zhang Xiaohua was originally hesitating, but this time Goldie made the decision for him. Zhang Xiaohua walked to the front of the gap and inserted his heavy sword into the gap. With a light pry, the stone door slid open. More black fog floated out from the gap, and light seeped out. Zhang Xiaohua squinted his eyes and peered through the gap. It was a small cave. The cave was inlaid with many luminous pearl. There was still a lot of black fog in the cave, and it was even thicker than what he saw on the mountain path. In the middle of the cave, there was a platform that was about the height of a person. There were some strange objects placed on top of it. Due to the distance, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't see them clearly. At this moment, Goldie was sitting on the platform with its body upright as it sucked in the black fog. Seeing that there was no danger, Zhang Xiaohua used his heavy sword to push open the stone door. He looked around with his eyes and divine sense and stepped into the cave. The ground in the cave was very flat, just like the mountain path on Lingering Fragrance Peak. It was paved with limestone slabs. Zhang Xiaohua walked to the front of the platform and didn't find anything strange. There were some strange objects placed on the platform, but Zhang Xiaohua couldn't tell what they were used for. With his divine sense, he didn't sense any yuan qi fluctuations from them. Zhang Xiaohua leaped onto the platform and saw something similar to the 8 trigrams purple gold furnace in the middle of the platform. However, this pill furnace was much smaller, only the size of 2 fists. The interior of the pill furnace was also solid, and it was obvious that it wasn't used to refine pills. Below the pill furnace, there was a black pearl that was the size of a date. Beside the pearl on the flat platform, there was a wisp of black fog that was constantly flowing up. The black fog was extremely fine, and it was almost invisible. However, when it spread out in the air, it gradually expanded, as though it was expanding. So the black fog in Evergreen Valley is gushing out from here? Where is this place? In an instant, countless questions rushed into Zhang Xiaohua's mind, faster than the black fog that was gushing out. Could it be that this platform is used to block the black fog? Perhaps this black pearl is used to suppress the black fog? Squatting on the platform, Zhang Xiaohua pinched her chin and thought for no reason. After a while, Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand, and the black pearl moved and flew above the black fog that appeared out of thin air. However, it only stopped for a while before it was immediately pushed by the black fog and rolled to the place where the pearl was just now. Then, Zhang Xiaohua cast a spell, and the pearl flew in front of Zhang Xiaohua again. Carefully looking at this black pearl, Zhang Xiaohua also tried to use her divine sense to invade it, but the strange fluctuations on the pearl couldn't find any flaws at all. Maybe it's some kind of treasure? Zhang Xiaohua thought. Seeing that there was no more pearl on the platform, Zhang Xiaohua felt relieved and kept the pearl in her money pouch. But why is this black fog gushing out of thin air? Zhang Xiaohua was still curious about the origin of the black fog. Her eyes and divine sense scanned the area for a long time, but she didn't find any clues. At this time, the black fog in the cave had been mostly absorbed by Goldie. Seeing that Goldie's absorption speed was getting slower and slower, it must have eaten its fill as it squinted its eyes and wagged its tail. Seeing the vertical scratches on Goldie's forehead, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She stretched out her left hand and pointed it at the place where the black fog gushed out. She closed her eyes and used the essence of Dan in her Naiwan palace to connect with the illusion breaker eye in her left hand. Only feeling a heavy wave of fatigue in her heart, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to delay and quickly opened her illusion breaker eye. What entered her eyes was a thin black line that stretched from the top to the bottom, and Zhang Xiaohua's illusion breaker, I couldn't see it anymore. It had reached the end. Oh, it turned out to be a type of pitch black gas. It actually came from underground, and I can see it with my delusion breaker Dharma eye. But what is this black gas? Zhang Xiaohua closed her falsehood breaker eyes and thought, if my skills are strong enough, my falsehood breaker eyes will be able to see very far. Maybe I can see where the black qi is coming from. -4. Chapter 852. Zhang Xiaohua was right. As long as one had enough divine powers, they would be able to see the origin of the black gas. However, this enough divine powers was something that Zhang Xiaohua would never have thought of. The black gas came from an unknown place underground and appeared abruptly on top of the platform. It was obvious that it did not follow an ordinary underground route. It was not the place Zhang Xiaohua thought he would normally go through. However, this platform blocked Zhang Xiaohua's line of sight and restricted his line of thought at the same time. Moreover, the strange thing on the platform made him mistake the purpose of the platform. He thought that the platform was to block the black gas. However, the real purpose of the platform was to raise the height so that the black bead could block the black gas from gushing out. The place where the black gas came from and the route it took were not the same as the platform, nor were they in the same space. To see the origin of the black lines in this space, that kind of divine power, TSK, perhaps could only be seen when Zhang Xiaohua's cultivation reached an unimaginable level. Just as Zhang Xiaohua closed his delusion breaker eye, Goldie, who was lazily sucking in the black gas, seemed to have sensed something and immediately flew to his side. Goldie copied Zhang Xiaohua's actions and squatted in front of the black gas. The delusion breaker eye on its forehead opened slightly. However, unlike Zhang Xiaohua, Goldie's eyes only opened slightly. Then, a ray of silver light shot out and stared at the place where the black gas came from. Squeak, squeak! Goldie squeaked as if it was very happy. Then, it threw itself on the platform and put its nose to the place where the black gas came from. A ray of white light shot out, and the black gas seemed to be attracted and went straight into Goldie's nose. Seeing that Goldie was sucking in the black gas again, Zhang Xiaohua stood up with a smile. At this time, there was not much black gas left in the cave, and they could already see clearly. When Zhang Xiaohua first came in, he was attracted by the platform in the cave and did not pay attention to anything else. Now that he had some free time, he looked around and was overjoyed. In the corner of the cave, there were dozens of strange plants, one of which was the ghost face mushroom he was looking for. The ghost face mushroom was more than half a foot long. The top of the mushroom was reddish-brown, and in the middle of the reddish-brown mushroom, there was a vivid ghost face with fangs. Is there really such a strange thing in the world? Seeing that it really looked like the ghost face in the legends, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but praise. This ghost face mushroom really lives up to its name. From the looks of it, it is at least 1,000 years old. And if it is really 10,000 years old, I'm afraid it will become a spirit. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly paused. Ayo, then what is that white thing in the mountain path? Looking at it, it seems to be alive, but also not alive. Could it be that something here has become a spirit? Looking at the things in front of him, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but shiver. Then, Zhang Xiaohua did not stand on ceremony and took out a pile of jade boxes and collected everything. Then he clapped his hands and walked back to the platform. Xiao Huang, be good, it's time to go. Zhang Xiaohua clapped his hands and said. Unexpectedly, Xiao Huang did not fly up to Zhang Xiaohua's head as fast as he expected. Instead, it did not seem to care and lazily raised its head. Its little head swayed and looked sleepy. What is this for? Zhang Xiaohua was curious and walked up to support Xiao Huang. Don't sleep here. It's so dark here. Don't catch a cold. Unexpectedly, Xiao Huang used its little paws to block Zhang Xiaohua's hand, as if it did not want to be carried. Then, it forced itself to wake up and straightened its body. As it squeaked, it pointed at the faint black gas on the platform and explained something to Zhang Xiaohua. Indeed, after a moment, Zhang Xiaohua understood and said in shock, You want to sleep here? Xiao Huang, be good, are you sure? Zhang Xiaohua was a little speechless when he heard little Martin's firm reply. He couldn't help but feel reluctant to part with little Martin. He was the one who delivered little Martin, and he had been holding it close to his chest ever since. Although little Martin had called him mother, he felt very happy. He felt that he hadn't let little Martin down for so long. Now that little Martin was going to stay here alone, he felt as if he was watching his child grow up and leave him. However, When he thought about little Martin's performance in Li Chui Valley and thought about how he had not moved for so long after he had warmed it, he thought that the black gas had a great effect on little Martin's growth. This kind of black gas was something that could only be found by chance. If he forcefully took it away, he did not know when he would encounter it again. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua nodded slightly and looked at the stone door that was wide open. He smiled and said, "Let's leave this door open first, but you have to be careful. If it's closed, I'm afraid you won't have the strength to push it open." That little Martin seemed to understand. With a so sound, it flew to Zhang Xiaohua's head and scratched his hair. Its big tail swayed in front of Zhang Xiaohua's eyes. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and allowed it to be mischievous. He walked to the door and patted little Martin. "I'm leaving. If you're full, come and find me. Or if I leave Lingxiang Peak, I'll come and take you away." Little Martin squeaked a few times and flew back to the platform. It lay there slanted and looked as if it was about to fall asleep. Zhang Xiaohua took one last look and walked up the mountain path. He walked back along the path that he came from. Along the way, the black fog had already disappeared and it was rather clean. Thinking that little Martin had already woken up and had found a place to grow, Zhang Xiaohua subconsciously took Little Black out of his bosom. However, Little Black was still sleeping soundly like before. It was not interested in the black fog in the surroundings at all. Perhaps Little Black's opportunity is still in the future. While thinking, Zhang Xiaohua arrived at the empty cave with the fork in the path. He originally wanted to go back to the original path. However, when he thought about how he had unintentionally given Little Yellow an opportunity, and how Little Yellow was slowly growing up while Little Black was still the same as before, he thought that if Little Black also called a mother, the two little things would play and act coquettishly with him. Wouldn't that be great? Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua looked at the other fork in the path and felt that there was nothing wrong with it. He kept Little Black in his bosom and continued to move forward with the great wisdom sword. He raised his head and walked towards the other mountain path. This mountain path was clean and there was no black fog. Zhang Xiaohua released his divine sense and looked at the stone walls of the mountain path for a long time. However, he did not find any clues. However, Lingxiang Peak was the core of Lingxiang cult. It was also the foundation of a large sect when the way of immortals flourished 10,000 years ago. It was normal that there was something that Zhang Xiaohua did not know. This mountain path went up. Zhang Xiaohua walked up the stairs very carefully. However, the luminous pearl on the stone wall emitted a faint brilliance, illuminating the mountain path. After walking for a long time, he did not see anything strange. The mountain path was not straight. Instead, it meandered upwards. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua did not know where he had walked to. Just as he was muttering in his heart, the mountain path leveled out and led straight to a white door. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes were sharp. Before he reached the end of the mountain path, he immediately recognized that the white door was carved out of a piece of white jade. When he walked closer, Zhang Xiaohua did not act rashly. He released his divine sense and looked carefully. When he did not find any hidden mechanisms, he moved forward. The door carved out of white jade was about the same size as the door he had seen underground. However, only the middle of this white jade door had a smooth jade surface. The surroundings of the door were engraved with patterns that were similar to the stone tablet Zhang Xiaohua had seen at the foot of Lingering Fragrance Peak. Could it be that this door was a magic weapon? Zhang Xiaohua then took out the small shield he obtained from Floating Hill Peak and carefully compared it. Sure enough, the pattern of the two was similar. However, after looking at it for a long time, Zhang Xiaohua could not see the use of the pattern. Maybe it's time to go in and take a look. With that thought, Zhang Xiaohua still did not use her hands. Instead, she held the great wisdom sword and gently opened the door. The door looked very heavy, but Zhang Xiaohua did not use much strength and just gently pushed it open. When Zhang Xiaohua looked inside, she could not help but be flabbergasted. Behind the door was not a cave like Zhang Xiaohua had imagined. It was also not like before, where there was a platform. Instead, it was a rather large hall. If it was a large hall, Zhang Xiaohua would not be surprised. However, all the furnishings in the hall were carved out of white jade. Even the surroundings of the hall, including the ceiling and the floor, were all made of white jade. She had seen extravagant people before, but she had never seen such extravagance. When Zhang Xiaohua was in the mysterious mountain villa, she had seen dozens of coffins carved out of jade. However, even though those were shocking, it was not as shocking as the entire hall made of white jade. Think about it. What kind of feeling would it be to see a jade stone as white as snow, a jade stone as warm as the arm of a beautiful woman? Step under your feet and sit under your butt. However, this was not considered much. After Zhang Xiaohua had seen everything in the hall, she could not help but sit on the warm jade stool in a daze. Saliva continuously flowed down her mouth as she greedily looked at the white jade. She was almost mumbling to herself. What kind of extravagance is this? He really didn't dare to imagine that this entire hall, everything in this hall was carved together. Could it be that this entire hall is carved out of a single piece of white jade? After a long while, when her saliva had formed a puddle on the white jade floor, Zhang Xiaohua finally regained her senses. She hurriedly rubbed the saliva on the floor with her feet and stood up. She reluctantly touched the jade table in front of her, feeling the smoothness of the surface. She admired the white, flawless surface of the jade and let out a long sigh. Heavens, since you did not give me the ability to take away this jade hall, why did you let me see it? -4. Chapter 853. That's right, not to mention the value of this jade hall. Just by looking at the hall's colorful jade and beautiful flowers, it would make people greedy. Just looking at it and not having the ability to take it for themselves. How could Zhang Xiaohua not sigh? After a long while, Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and smiled. There's a kind of liking called letting go. Maybe if I don't take it away, it will leave a good impression in my heart. Immediately she said in distress, "But I really want to take it away." What's the matter with the fragrant religion? Why would they put such a thing here? Don't they know? Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua unconsciously became vigilant. There was no one here, but it didn't mean that no one on Lingering Fragrance Peak knew. It also didn't mean that no one would come. She had better be careful. It was only at this moment that Zhang Xiaohua withdrew her attention from the hall carved with jade and carefully observed the furnishings in the hall. The furnishings in the hall were very simple. In addition to the stone table, stone chairs, stone stools, and other things that Zhang Xiaohua had seen before, there were some silk and other things in the hall. Directly above the hall, there were 3 portraits. Zhang Xiaohua slowly walked forward and carefully looked at the 3 portraits. In the middle of the 3 portraits, there was a woman in green. Her figure was graceful and her face was covered with a veil. She held a long whip in her hand and stood beside a small bridge. Her eyes were looking at the gurgling water under the small bridge, as if she was thinking about something. On the left was a portrait of a man in embroidered clothes. He held a long knife in his hand and rode on a horse. It seemed that the wind was blowing and the man's clothes were flying, showing his heroic spirit. On the right was another portrait, but it was a scholar in white. A sword hung at his waist and a folding fan in his hand. He was walking leisurely and seemed to be endlessly carefree. These 3 paintings seemed to be from a long time ago. The paintings were yellowed, but they were drawn very realistically. Everyone was vivid and lifelike on the paper. Although the face of the woman in green was covered by a veil, the tenderness of her emotions could be seen at a glance. It was a subtle contrast to the heroism of the man on the horse and the elegance of the white-robed scholar. While admiring it, Zhang Xiaohua realized that there was a large blank space beside the scholar's portrait. It would be perfect if another painting was placed there. Could it be that there was a 4th portrait here in the past? Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head, but this thought only flashed through her mind. Whether there was a portrait or not, it had nothing to do with Zhang Xiaohua. Why would she think about it? Zhang Xiaohua seemed to be used to picking up junk. After looking at the portraits, she searched the magnificent hall for a long time. but she couldn't find any junk that she could pick up. She couldn't help but feel resentful. While she was setting up this dazzling jade hall, she nagged, "Ai, this is such a luxurious hall. Elder of the fragrant religion, can't you put some magical tools here? Even if you don't like them, you can just throw one or two away. You can't blame me for coming here." As she spoke, she walked to the door of the jade. Looking at the door, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but smile. Could it be that this door that can move is also a part of this jade? When she released her divine sense, she looked carefully. Indeed, the door had an extremely intricate mechanism that was connected to the hull. Looking at the pattern of the jade, it matched the hull perfectly. Needless to say, the door was also a part of the entire jade. "I've been defeated." Zhang Xiaohua sighed and was about to retract his divine sense. What is this?" Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense suddenly discovered that around the jade door, in other words, the exterior of the jade hall that was covered by the mountain rocks, there were actually some yuan qi fluctuations. Could it be the entire hall is a magical tool? Or is there a part that can be refined? Thinking about it, Zhang Xiaohua made a hand seal and escaped into the stone wall. She followed the outside of the hall and used her divine sense to search. This jade hall was quite big. She followed the traces of the fluctuation on the outside, but couldn't find any clues. Zhang Xiaohua's vision turned dark and she came to an empty space. "Oh no! I only looked in front and didn't pay attention to the back. Where am I? Sigh. Lingering fragrance peak really can't be rushed. I haven't walked much, and I'm already lost." Zhang Xiaohua secretly regretted it. Before he could take out the night-luminescent pearl, the darkness in front of him suddenly changed, and his eyes were filled with light. What's going on? Zhang Xiaohua was extremely surprised and thought. However, when he saw everything before him clearly, his expression couldn't help but change greatly. "Ladies and gentlemen, what do you think?" It turned out that what appeared in front of Zhang Xiaohua was a straw hut in front of a river. Zhang Xiaohua was standing on a wooden bridge that extended into the river's waters. Isn't this the place where I met my dream and Shirtai? Without waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to understand, a girl bounced over and asked with a smile, "Xiaohua, did you catch a fish today?" "Fish?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. When she lowered her head, she saw the great wisdom sword in her hand. Wasn't she holding a fishing rod in her hand? Looking at her body, she was exactly the same as when she was 12 years old. Illusion array. Zhang Xiaohua immediately understood in his mind and wanted to release his divine sense. But when he saw that Meng was also 11 years old, he immediately changed his mind. Yes, even if it was an illusion array, so what? Ever since he parted ways with Meng at the riverside, they hadn't seen each other for many years. Although their encounter in the mortal world was short, Meng had left a deep mark in his heart. Although he didn't know where Meng was and could only taste her appearance in his memory, he didn't know what Meng was like now. But as long as he could see Meng again, be together with Meng again, and smell her breath again, so what if he fell into an illusion array? However, Zhang Xiaohua thought for a while. It seemed that at the riverside he was seriously injured. Most of the time he was lying on the bed and was taken care of by Meng. He had never done anything like fishing before. Of course, since it was an illusion array and he could be together with Meng. Zhang Xiaohua was too lazy to pursue the matter. She smiled and said, "Who said I didn't? I just caught 2 kissing fishes. Seeing that they were family, I couldn't bear to part with them, so I let them go this time." Xiaoming, don't tell me you want to eat 2 kissing fishes in fish soup? Hee. Brother Xiaohua, you are really too naughty, Meng said as she stepped forward and pointed her fair finger at Zhang Xiaohua's forehead. This intimate action was something that Zhang Xiaohua had imagined countless times in his mind. Now that it really happened in the illusion array, Zhang Xiaohua was dumbfounded. You know why? Behind Meng, another girl appeared. She was Nie Xiaoyu, who appeared in Zhang Xiaohua's mind when he said, "Little fishy just now." "Brother Ren, are you okay?" Nie Qianyu was still shy and asked with her head slightly lowered. Before Zhang Xiaohua could answer, Meng sneered, Xiaohua, who is she? Looking at Meng's cold and indifferent expression, Zhang Xiaohua was shocked and hurriedly said, Meng, don't misunderstand. Little Fishy is a little girl that I saved on the road. I was just sending her home. Nia Qinyu nodded and said, Sister, Brother Rin is really a good person. He was just sending me home. Just sending you home? Meng looked at Zhang Xiaohua and then at Nia Qinyu and said with a smile, It seems that he also won the martial arts competition. He even taught me the Forget Worries Sutra. Well, he also told me about the cicada's mournful cry to the eternal pavilion. Do you think I don't know anything? Looking at Meng's indifferent and sorrowful eyebrows, Zhang Xiaohua felt a pang of heartache. Even though they were in the illusion array and he knew that this was just a memory in his heart, Zhang Xiaohua was reluctant to let Meng be unhappy. He stepped forward and held Meng's fair hand. He said in a low voice, Meng, you are the only one in my heart. When I saw you before, I was still young and didn't know anything. But all these years, I have been thinking about you. All these years? Meng was surprised and said, What nonsense are you talking about? We have only met for a few days. Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said patiently, Anyway, you are the only one in my heart. If I don't tell you now, I will regret it when you leave with Shirtai. Really? Meng smiled mysteriously and said, Brother Xiaohua, you said you missed me, but why didn't you look for me? Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head and said, I wanted to look for you, but I don't know where you are. Jianghu is so big, At this time, Meng held one hand and covered Zhang Xiaohua's mouth with the other hand. She said with a smile, Brother Xiaohua, don't say any more. I know what you are thinking. Actually, I am the same. Since I met you, my heart can't hold anyone else. I just want to be with you for the rest of my life. Me too, Zhang Xiaohua said happily. But Meng turned around and pointed at Nia Qinyu. What about her? Her? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. At this time, Nia Qinyu had already burst into tears. She covered her mouth and said, Brother Rin, I know what you are thinking. You can go with this sister. I am fine. Zhang Xiaohua's heart ached. At this time, Meng flung her hand and ran away quickly. She said as she ran, Brother Xiaohua, it is not that I don't believe you, but I don't trust this girl. I think you should find a way to make her disappear from this world. Only then can I see you. After saying that, Meng disappeared without a trace. The fishing rod in Zhang Xiaohua's hand also disappeared and the Prajna Heavy sword reappeared. Nia Qinyu took a step forward and cried like a pear blossom in the rain. She said, Brother Rin, just kill me. I miss you and miss you. If I can't see you, I would rather die. Ha ha ha. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua laughed. Even if it is an illusion, even if it is a fake person, in my heart it is a real killing. Will my dream allow me to do it? Do you think I let myself do it? Before Zhang Xiaohua could finish her words, a crisp kacha sound rang out. It was as if a bronze mirror had shattered. All the scenes disappeared, and another scene appeared in front of Zhang Xiaohua's eyes. -4. Chapter 854. Peacock and Rin Xiaoyao had spent a lot of time together in the refining heart cave, and they were already familiar with each other. Peacock had also been through countless trials and tribulations. She knew that Rin Xiaoyao was just her inner demon, an illusion created by her in the refining heart cave. He was not real. Initially, she was still a little reserved, but after a while, she could not care less. In addition, Peacock remembered Abbess Jing Fan's advice that she had to follow her heart in the refining heart cave and let nature take its course. Only then would she have a chance to break the array. Hence, she no longer held back. It was all her own wishful thinking, and no one would know. Maybe she could find a chance in this place. At this time, Peacock and Rin Xiaoyao were chatting about some private matters. Peacock would occasionally ask about cultivation methods and opportunities. Suddenly, Rin Xiaoyao, who was hugging Peacock, disappeared in a flash of light. Oh, did I succeed in refining my heart? Did I break the array? Peacock was overjoyed. However, the starlight and her body lying in midair told her that she was still in the illusion array. What's going on? I didn't kill Rin Xiaoyao. How did he disappear? While Peacock was still in shock, she saw Zhang Xiaohua's head poking out from not far away. He looked around as if he was looking for something. Peacock smiled and leaped forward. She hugged Zhang Xiaohua's neck and said, "Hubby, where did you go? I'm asking you a question." This Zhang Xiaohua was the real Zhang Xiaohua. When he was enlightened in the illusion array, he didn't kill Nie Qinyu just because she was an illusion. Instead, he used her to please the illusion. The illusion array immediately changed and sent Zhang Xiaohua to another place. In the blink of an eye, Zhang Xiaohua saw a place filled with stars. He was walking in the void, thinking that the dream was hidden somewhere in the starry sky. Thus, he didn't dare to release his divine sense, afraid that if he broke the array, he wouldn't be able to see the dream. Just as he was looking around for his dream, he saw the peacock flying towards him. The peacock hugged him and affectionately called him husband. Zhang Xiaohua fainted and mumbled, "Sister, Kong, why are you here?" Yes, she called him hubby. How could he still call her Master Kong? Furthermore, Zhang Xiaohua did not expect to have a peacock in his heart. How could he not be embarrassed? Hearing Zhang Xiaohua calling her Sister Kong, Peacock giggled. She lifted Zhang Xiaohua's head and kissed him on the cheek. She said, "You're such a lovable and hateful person. You called me your wife, and now you're calling me sister. Do you think I should slap you to death?" Peacock's kiss was so real that it made Zhang Xiaohua's face burn. He thought to himself, Since when did I have such thoughts about Master Kong? This is so flattering." Then he was shocked. Don't tell me she saw it in her dream. If she sees it, she'll be angry again. With that thought in mind, Zhang Xiaohua immediately pushed Peacock away and said, "Big Sister Kong, this is not good. What if someone else sees? Someone sees it?" Peacock smiled. "Aren't you me, and I'm you? How can anyone see it?" As she spoke, she walked in front of Zhang Xiaohua and floated up. She wrapped her arms around Zhang Xiaohua's neck and said, "It's all because of you. You still want me to be your wife? Even now, you still call me big sister. Then you're me, and I'm you?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly. "How can I not know? But isn't there a dream beside me?" Hearing Peacock's reprimand, Zhang Xiaohua peeked at the stars around them and whispered, "Then I'll call you my wife, but what?" Peacock's face was a little red. She grabbed Zhang Xiaohua's hand and said shyly, "You'll only tell me the truth if I let you put it here?" Zhang Xiaohua put his hand there and felt like he was struck by lightning. His heart was trembling. Oh my God, how can this illusion array be so real? He thought to himself, and his fingers scratched a few times. Could it be that this is what it feels like? The strange feeling from his hand made Zhang Xiaohua's heart itch. But he quickly calmed himself down and looked around. "Dream, where are you? Please don't see me." Peacock's face was still burning. She scolded, "I knew you wouldn't be honest. Sai, who asked you to be my nemesis? I saw you in the Rejuvenation Valley. Sai, I don't know, it's nothing, but I just can't forget you. Oh my God, why do I feel so good about myself?" Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. Master Kong is an inner disciple. I can't believe I thought so badly of him. But since you're my enemy, I've given you everything here. Why can't you let me see through? Let me see the secrets of heaven." As she spoke, Peacock hugged Zhang Xiaohua again and stretched out her cherry lips. Petrified. Zhang Xiaohua felt moist and fragrant. His heart was like a monkey on a horse. This illusion is really... Sai, it's too erotic. I have to deal with it quickly. Don't let Meng see it. Should I kill her? How can I do that? Even if it's fake, I have to follow my heart. I can't kill innocent people for their treasures. Oh, Heaven's Way. Just by looking at the Heaven's Way, I can let Sister Kong go? Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua had an idea. He looked at the starry sky and cupped Peacock's face. He kissed her red lips and smiled. "If you can leave just by looking at the Heaven's Way, Then your husband will open your eyes and let you see what the real heaven's way is." As he spoke, he crossed his legs and sat with his palms facing the sky, trying to understand the heaven's way in his mind and at the same time trying to show his understanding to the starry sky. Zhang Xiaohua was right. In the illusion array, the demon was born from the heart. Even the understanding of the heaven's way could be shown. However, the heaven's way was still the heaven's way. It was not something an illusion array could compare to. How much of the heaven's way could be shown was debatable. But even if it was just a trace of the heaven's way, in this illusion array, how unparalleled was it? In an instant, the starry sky, which was silent and motionless, began to move slowly, as if every star had its own unique path, and the entire starry sky's path was projected. Peacock was stunned on the spot. She was just challenging her own heart as usual, challenging her nemesis, Rin Xiaoyao, who knew that his answer this time would be different from before. He would show her the heaven's way. She was pleasantly surprised and could not believe her ears. When she saw the reflection of the heaven's way in the starry sky, she knew immediately that this was the end result of her painstaking cultivation of the Mortal Heart Sutra. Such a heaven-defying opportunity was placed right in front of her eyes. Immediately, she crossed her legs and sat down, channeling the Mortal Heart Sutra. Her eyes stared unblinkingly at the starry sky, trying her best to imprint the heaven's way in her mind. After an unknown amount of time, the heaven's way was still moving, but Peacock could not understand it anymore. She was after all a martial artist, and the Mortal Heart Sutra was just a way to pursue the path of immortality. To be able to learn a trace of the heaven's way from Zhang Xiaohua's way was already a rare and precious thing. Peacock knew that her opportunity had come to an end. She immediately closed her eyes and channeled her Mortal Heart Sutra. Not long after, Peacock realized that her Mortal Heart Sutra had reached an unimaginable level. It would not be an exaggeration to say that it had reached the peak of perfection. Peacock was overjoyed. She stood up and looked at the heaven's way that was still moving, and then looked at Zhang Xiaohua, who was sitting cross-legged. She could not help but think, Master was right, this man is my nemesis, and only by going with the flow will I be able to get the opportunity to break the array. I might even be able to achieve a breakthrough in the Mortal Heart Sutra. At the same time, Peacock suddenly thought, no wonder Master was so tight-lipped about her experience in the cave of refined heart. How could she tell anyone about such an embarrassing experience? Peacock's face turned red as she thought about it. At this moment, the heaven's way stopped moving. Zhang Xiaohua stood up with a smile. Have you understood it? Peacock smiled and jumped into Zhang Xiaohua's arms. She buried her face in his neck and murmured, Yes, yes. Just as she uttered the words, I'm enlightened, Peacock felt a force tugging at her. She immediately understood that she had broken the array and was about to leave this illusion. She was about to leave this man who had been with her for who knows how long, and she was about to leave this man who had given birth to a child with her. I'm leaving Xiaoyao, my husband. I'll always remember everything that happened here. Peacock's tears dripped down and stained Zhang Xiaohua's clothes. She opened her cherry lips and bit Zhang Xiaohua's neck, leaving a row of deep teeth marks on Zhang Xiaohua's neck. Without waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to jump and scream, Peacock disappeared without a trace. Only Zhang Xiaohua's cries of pain resounded through the entire starry sky. Lord Kong, Sister Kong, Lady Kong, you are too cruel. It's just an illusion. How can it be so realistic? I'm really in pain. Fortunately, Peacock had already left the illusion array. Otherwise, who knows what would have happened? Zhang Xiaohua touched the teeth marks on her neck and smiled bitterly. I don't know if Meng will see them when I find her later. I can't bring the things in the illusion array out. Don't tell me I still have these teeth marks on my neck when I go out. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was about to continue searching for Dream, she heard someone shouting from afar. Ran Xiaoyao, stop right there! -4. Chapter 855. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised to hear the familiar voice. When he turned around, he was even more surprised. He thought to himself, "Are you kidding me? When did this Chun Chin appear in my memory again? Could it be that I also have some feelings for her?" Chun Chen held a long sword and was very happy to see Zhang Xiaohua. She gritted her teeth and said, "You little thief, stop right there. I gave everything to you. You eloped with Nie Qinyu." "What?" Zhang Xiaohua fell down. Fortunately, they were in a strange, starry sky, and he was not afraid of falling down. "What the hell is going on? When did my memory become so bad? But if you want to argue, Nie Qinyu is in front of Chin Chen." While he was thinking, Chun Chun came closer and was in a flying position. Zhang Xiaohua saw Chun Chen glaring at him coldly with a face full of anger and did not hesitate to stab the sword into his heart. Zhang Xiaohua knew that the sword was just an illusion and would not really take his life. However, when he thought about how Lord Peacock had bitten his neck just now and it was still hurting, was there any need to say anything else when the sword pierced through his body? Therefore, he raised his right hand and grabbed the tip of the sword. He exerted a little force and snatched it away. Chun Chin was not surprised to see the long sword being snatched away. She widened her almond-shaped eyes and said, "You little thief! How dare you treat me like this and not let me kill you to vent my anger? You are really ungrateful." After that, she did not care about the long sword and grabbed Zhang Xiaohua's ear and shouted, "How dare you cheat on me again and again? How dare you break my heart again and again?" Ouch! It was the first time in Zhang Xiaohua's life that a girl had pulled his ear like that. He couldn't help but feel strange. Even if he was angry, he couldn't bring himself to be angry. Thinking about the appearance of the illusion peacock just now, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He threw his sword on the ground, grabbed Chin Chen's hand that was pulling his ear with his left hand, and wrapped his right hand skillfully around Chin Chen's waist. He smiled and said, "Sister, Chin." Before he could finish his sentence, Zhang Xiaohua felt something was wrong. He didn't seem to be calling her that intimately enough. Sure enough, Chin Chen's hand was grabbed by Zhang Xiaohua and she immediately tried to break free. She even pulled Zhang Xiaohua's ear and scolded, "You were calling me your wife just now, and in the blink of an eye, you've become my sister." Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. Why was this exactly the same as what Peacock said? However, it dawned on her that they were all in her own illusion. How could there be any difference? When she was with Peacock earlier, Zhang Xiaohua already had a way to deal with girls, and now it was not difficult. She just held Chin Chen in her arms and coaxed her gently. It did not take long for Chin Chen's anger to dissipate. However, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. Chin Chin is even more voluptuous than Peacock? How come I didn't know that I could still remember this in this illusion? What am I thinking about every day? In the illusion, Chin Chin was more straightforward than Zhang Xiaohua thought. After a few rounds of tenderness, Zhang Xiaohua had taken the initiative to comfort Chin Chin, but now, Chun Chun was the one who took the initiative to take the initiative. Ouch! What should I do? Although it's an illusion. But, after all, it's not a dream. Maybe the dream is watching us. Just now, when she saw Nie Xiaoyu, she was already furious. If she saw me and Chen Chen together, what would happen? Zhang Xiaohua managed to keep her mind calm, although there was a faint expectation in her heart when she thought about her dream. She could not help but hesitate. Seeing Chun Chen's blushing face and her seductive eyes, Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to be careless. She moved closer to Chin Chen's ear and said, "Wife, you." "Wait a moment." Chen Chen glanced at her. "Xiaoyao, my husband." Chen Chen bit her lips lightly. Her eyes were watery. "What do you want?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned, but immediately understood. Her face immediately turned red, and she said hurriedly, "Don't you want to see the heavenly Tao?" Heavenly Tao. Chen Chen was originally infatuated, but when she heard the heavenly Tao, she immediately became wild with joy. She thought to herself, sure enough, the opportunity has arrived. Of course, you're my husband. Of course, you'll give it to me. As she said this, her little hand unceremoniously pinched Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua was embarrassed and did not dare to be careless. She pushed Qin Qin slightly and calmed her mind. She expelled all the distracting thoughts and fantasies in her mind. Then, she communicated with the illusion array, and the stars in the sky began to move. Qin Qin looked at her husband, who had been with her for who knows how long. Seeing the surrounding stars change, she immediately sat cross-legged like a peacock and operated the Mortal Heart Sutra. Soon, she became a solemn statue, which was completely different from before. Qin Qin's cultivation level was lower than Peacock's by 2 levels. The evolution of the heavenly Tao was only less and stopped. Even so, the improvement of the Mortal Heart Sutra was not something that Nun Jingfan could achieve. Of course, this was only the cultivation of the Heart Sutra. It was different from martial arts or internal energy. Looking at Qin Qin, who stood up, Zhang Xiaohua was a little reluctant, but still asked with a smile, "Wife, have you?" "Understood." "Husband, with you, of course I can understand." Before Qin Qin finished speaking, her face immediately lit up with joy. Zhang Xiaohua looked at her with a smile. She knew that Qin Qin in this illusion would disappear again. Sure enough, Qin Qin hugged Zhang Xiaohua and kissed him fiercely on the lips. Zhang Xiaohua responded by hugging her with his left hand and covering his neck with his right to prevent another sneak attack. However, suddenly, her lips hurt and there was a salty taste. "Oh God, it's impossible to guard against it." Zhang Xiaohua cried out miserably. Qin Qin smiled and said, "I will always remember you, my husband." Before she finished speaking, Qin Qin disappeared. Only Zhang Xiaohua was left behind, shouting, "Why are you like Peacock? Could it be that all the girls in my memory are this violent?" Licking the wound on her lips, Zhang Xiaohua was in pain, but happy at the same time. Her heart was flying. Qin Qin, who was out of the illusion, was a little surprised. "What? There's blood in this illusion." Then she wiped it with her finger and shook her head. "How is this blood? Are there golden threads in human blood?" Just as she was about to shake off the golden liquid, a sweet smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. She placed her finger in front of her mouth and licked it with her small tongue. She thought to herself, "This is my husband's blood. How can I waste it?" Just when Qin Qin was feeling happy, she heard someone exclaim, "Someone else came out!" Qin Qin was suddenly awakened. She saw that she was standing where she was before she entered the refining heart cave. Beside her was her senior sister, Peacock. "Senior sister? You came out too?" Thinking about what happened in the illusion, Qin Qin could not help but blush. Fortunately, there was a veil covering her face, so others could not see it. "Congratulations, junior sister, you came out too." Peacock had calmed down and said with a hint of melancholy, "Senior sister, aren't you the same? You came out a long time ago." Where are the other senior sisters?" "Not out yet." Qin Qin looked around and was surprised. It was already nightfall and a day had passed. There were only 2 people who came out of the illusion safely. "It's still early. I heard the elders say that the refining heart cave will only close tomorrow morning. By then, the disciples who didn't break the illusion will be forced out." "Oh, why didn't the master say this?" "The elders were afraid that we would be lucky and affect the refining heart cave, so they didn't say anything. We can't tell the disciples who enter the refining heart cave in the future." Before Peacock finished speaking, there was a cry of surprise. "Peacock! Qin Qin! You! Why did you come out so early?" A figure flew in from afar. Looking at the familiar figure, was it not their master, Jingfan Nun? Peacock and Qin Qin greeted with a smile and bowed. "We did not disappoint you. We passed the test of the refining heart cave." Good, good, good. Jingfan Nun's eyes were almost filled with tears. She hoped that her 2 disciples could pass the test. However, she had been through the test herself and knew how difficult it was. She did not dare to have too much hope in her heart. Now that it had only been a few hours, She was worried and came to take a look. Who would have thought that? Both of her disciples came out and passed the test of the refining heart cave. Jing Fan Nun held the hands of her two disciples. She was a little choked up. Back then, she did not pass the test of the refining heart cave and had always been brooding. Now that her two disciples were so good, they came out of the refining heart cave safely as soon as the sky turned dark. She had mixed feelings. She was moved by the progress of the younger generation and also moved by the passing of time. The refining heart cave was meant to refine one's state of mind, but it had nothing to do with the improvement of the sutras. Therefore, Jing Fan Nun did not think that her disciples could use the extraordinary experience of the refining heart cave to improve their sutras to an unimaginable level. Jing Fan Nun also knew about the experience of the refining heart cave, so she did not ask them. Only Chin held back for a moment. He really wanted to ask, so he asked in a low voice, Master Yu, when you came out of the refining heart cave, did your sutras, mortal sutras, change in any way? Jing Fan Shirtai was startled and shook her head. Master was pushed out of the refining heart cave by the illusory formation in the early morning. He didn't pass it, so how could there be any progress in his mental cultivation method? Then he thought for a while and said, However, I heard from the great elder and the hierarch that although the refining heart cave does not directly help one's cultivation, it has a direct and indirect effect on one's future cultivation. Only by passing the test of the refining heart cave can one become a direct disciple. Only then can one obtain the inheritance of our fragrant religion in the secret inheritance room. Peacock and Chen both let out a cry of disbelief. What's wrong? Jing Fan was startled and asked, Is there something wrong? -4. Chapter 856. After Zhang Xiaohua sent away the peacock and Chen in his illusion, he took a deep breath and patted his chest. Smack, smack. His lips were bitten by the illusion of Chen, and he touched his neck, which was bitten by the illusion of the peacock. A feeling of longing for more welled up in him. Zhang Xiaohua had never had such an erotic dream in his 18 years of life. He never thought that this dream would come true in the illusory array of the fragrance cult. Moreover, this erotic dream came like a violent storm. Even if Zhang Xiaohua could soar in the storm like a swallow, he was still caught off guard. It was just that. Zhang Xiaohua felt that this was not his dream, and it was not the Nie Qinyu who had feelings for him. This made Zhang Xiaohua feel even more incredulous, and he felt a little guilty. However, what was even more strange was that Zhang Xiaohua did not know that there were two inner disciples of Lingxiang Peak hidden in the depths of his consciousness. Chen's voluptuous is really not bad. Peacock's skin is also good. Zhang Xiaohua rubbed his chin and looked at the place where the two disappeared just now. There was an inexplicable sense of melancholy in his heart. Was this an erotic dream without a trace? Immediately, Zhang Xiaohua collected his thoughts and searched for the dream in this illusory array. It was just a pity that Zhang Xiaohua had just evolved the heavenly axiom in the illusory array. This was the truth of heaven and earth that was much more profound than the illusory array. Zhang Xiaohua had used the heavenly axiom to drive the illusory array and had already infiltrated a trace of the heavenly axiom into the illusory array. For someone who had comprehended the heavenly axiom, how could the illusory array extract any inner demons from his heart? Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua searched for a long time and did not find any trace of the dream. Moreover, even Nie Qinyu was nowhere to be found. Strange, where did they all go? Just now they came one by one. Those who should come are here, and those who shouldn't come are here. Now, those who should have left are gone, and those who shouldn't have left are gone. This illusion array, why is it gone? By the way, besides Dream and Nie Little Fishy, Peacock and Chin are here. Why aren't Little Orange and Zhang Pinger here? Damn, this guy doesn't seem to be satisfied yet. However, when she thought of Zhang Pinger, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly realized that she had been in this Li Chui Valley for a long time and did not know what the situation outside was like. Although Mei Suing did not mention the time of the test, she guessed that it would be dark soon. She would not fall asleep in this Li Chui Valley, right? Forget it. I don't know where Meng has run off to. I'd better go out and take a look. I'll explain everything here clearly. When I'm free in the future, I'll come here to play. Having been in the illusory array for a long time, Zhang Xiaohua naturally knew how to break the array. She cast a few incantations, and a passage appeared in the starry sky of the illusory array. Zhang Xiaohua rode the wind and went straight in. Outside the Li Chui Valley, the sky was completely dark. The few disciples who came to watch the fun in the morning had already left. Only 2 young girls stood there, letting the mountain wind blow their clothes into a mess. Needless to say, the girl was Zhang Pinger. She stared at the entrance of the valley, almost unable to take her eyes off it. The melancholy on her face was obvious. The other person was Zhang Pinger's 6th senior sister, Shui Linglong. Although Shui Linglong was also staring at the entrance of the valley, she obviously did not care. However, her gaze occasionally swept across Zhang Pinger's face, and there was some worry in it. Shui Linglong looked at the sky, lifted her collar, and patted Zhang Pinger. She said in a low voice, "Junior sister, don't wait. Those who enter this ghost valley rarely come out after 4 hours. Look at Ren Xiaoyao. From what you said, he should have been in there for 12 hours. He might have died inside. You see, 3rd senior sister doesn't even want to wait here. You'd better go back with me. 3rd senior sister. She is really hateful. How can she treat junior brother Rin like this? Junior brother Rin is such a good person. He saved me 3 times and also saved Master's life. I only wanted to repay his kindness by forcefully bringing him from the pill opening hall to Lingering Fragrance Peak. I originally wanted to, but I actually suffered from 3rd senior sister's evil scheme. I will not let her off. I only quarreled with her for a few words, and she wants to kill him." Zhang Pinger was somewhat gnashing her teeth. Shui Linglong was speechless. Mei Sujin and Zhang Pinger were both her senior sisters. Although she had a good relationship with Zhang Pinger, if she was not done with Mei Sujin, she also had to think about it. "Since things are like this, let's go back. Master and senior sister will come back tomorrow. This matter, let them decide." Zhang Pinger's eyes didn't leave the entrance of Li Chui Valley at all. She said very firmly, "6th senior sister, if you are bored, you can go back first. I still want to wait. Junior brother Ren's martial arts are very strong. This ghost valley definitely won't be able to stop him." But Shui Linglong was somewhat angry. "But in this ghost valley, one can't escape just because their martial arts are high. Previously, didn't Mo Xiangong's disciple also die inside? Your junior brother Ren. How can he be compared to Mo Xiangong's disciple?" Zhang Pinger slowly shook her head. "Junior brother Ren's martial arts might not be as high as Mo Xiangong's disciple, but I have a premonition that he will definitely not let me wait in vain. 7th junior sister, could it be that you have already turned into a devil? How can he come out alive? Furthermore, even if he comes out alive, how can you get what you want? Don't forget that you are the direct disciple of the deputy master of the Lihua Temple. Your status is very noble. Ren Xiaoyao is just a little medicine boy of the pill-sprouting hall. Although he has some martial arts, he is the lowest disciple guarding the garden in the Lihua Temple. Even the disciple guarding the pill furnace can't compare with him. His master has already repaid his kindness by bringing him from the pill-sprouting hall to the Lihua Temple. In the future, he still has to walk his own path. There are thousands of disciples in the Lihua Temple. How can he, a disciple with no background, stand out? Even if you want to be together with him, Master, how can she agree? How can Mo Xiangong's elders agree?" Hearing this, Zhang Pinger's face turned slightly red. She used her hand to tidy up her hair that was messed up by the mountain wind and slowly said, "6th senior sister is wrong. Since you have seen through my feelings, I don't mind telling you that the matter of being together with him is too far away. I don't dare to think too much about it. I only wish to be in the same hall as him and be able to see him every day. That is enough for me. Crazy, crazy. Shui Linglong stomped her feet with an exasperated look on her face. At this moment, a voice was heard. Is it Senior Sister Zhang? It's already so late. Why don't you go back to wash up and sleep? Senior brother? When Zhang Pinger heard the familiar voice, she was overjoyed. She screamed and threw herself at him. When she saw Zhang Xiaohua's face under the light, she threw herself into his arms without a care for anything else. Zhang Xiaohua wanted to dodge, but she didn't dare to. She would feel embarrassed if she didn't dodge. When Zhang Xiaohua's hot body was in his arms, Zhang Xiaohua could only hold the heavy sword with both hands and raise it up high. She didn't forget to rub her nose with one hand as if she was in an illusion again. Senior brother? Hearing Zhang Xiaohua's strange address, Shui Linglong frowned. When she saw Zhang Pinger's rudeness, she shook her head. She looked around and saw that there was no one around. Then, she looked at Zhang Xiaohua's pitiful appearance. She couldn't help but laugh in her heart. When Shui Linglong walked in front of her, she coughed twice and said, "Seventh junior sister, this is the Fiery Palace. You are the direct disciple of the Fiery Palace." Zhang Pinger's tears of joy had already wet the front of Zhang Xiaohua's clothes. When her unbridled emotions were interrupted by Shui Linglong, she immediately felt ashamed. When Zhang Xiaohua's scent rushed into her nose again, Zhang Pinger immediately let go of her arms and took a few steps back. She stood silently in the darkness. Shui Linglong looked at Zhang Pinger and said to Zhang Xiaohua with a smile, "Junior brother-in, congratulations. You have been in there for more than 12 hours. You actually came out alive." Zhang Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, Senior Sister Shui. It was all thanks to you and Senior Sister Shui that I was able to escape safely. Junior brother-in, did you encounter any danger in the Ghost Valley?" Zhang Pinger asked timidly in the shadows. She was both concerned and embarrassed. "Yes, but it's all in the past. It's good that I came out alive. Don't you think so, Senior Sister Zhang?" At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua's words were the truth in Zhang Pinger's heart. Zhang Pinger immediately nodded. "Yes, that's right. It's good that you came out alive. You didn't disappoint." She couldn't finish her sentence. Zhang Xiaohua's expression changed. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your concern, Senior Sister Zhang. It would have been good if I came out earlier. I have made you worry for so long. It's nothing. I had nothing to do here. I was just enjoying myself here." Zhang Pinger didn't mean it, but she unknowingly said Rin Xiaoyao's name. Zhang Pinger felt even more ashamed. She lowered her head to her chest. Her fair nape was especially seductive in the night, especially since Zhang Xiaohua had just been seduced. Zhang Xiaohua's mouth was a little dry. He swallowed his saliva with difficulty. He thought for a moment and took out something from his chest. He smiled and said, "Senior Sister Zhang, Senior Sister Shui, where is Senior Sister Mei?" "This ghost face mushroom. I picked it. However, I searched the entire Lichui Valley and this is the oldest one." "How old is it?" "I don't know." What Zhang Xiaohua took out was the ghost face mushroom that he had picked at the bottom of the valley in Lichui Valley. But it was not the ghost face mushroom that had already taken shape in the cave. But thinking about it, it was reasonable. With Zhang Xiaohua's stingy character, how could she take out the best thing? When Zhang Pinger heard this, she immediately lifted her head and bit her lips. "It's all right, Junior brother-in. As long as you can get the item, it's fine. Third Senior Sister is obviously making things difficult for you. How can there be 1,000-year-old ghost face mushroom in the Ghost Valley?" Zhang Xiaohua tactfully handed over the ghost face mushroom and said, "I'll follow Senior Martial Sister's decision." -4. Chapter 857. When Zhang Xiaohua handed the ghost face mushroom to Zhang Pinger, high above in the west of Lingshan Peak, where the refining heart cave was located. Nun Jingfan couldn't hide the surprise on her face. She grabbed Qin Chen, who couldn't hide his joy, and asked in a loud voice, "Qin Chen, you, say that again. You actually practiced the Mortal Heart Sutra to great success?" Qin Chen was a little proud and flaunting. He nodded and said, "That's right, master. I went through the tempering of my mind in the refining heart cave and broke through the bottleneck of the mental cultivation method. I achieved great success in one leap and got out of the illusory array." "How? How is this possible?" Jing Fan Shirtai frowned and said, "The dreamland can only sharpen one's state of mind. It will be of great benefit to one's cultivation in the future. I've never heard of anyone being able to break through any bottleneck in the refining heart cave, let alone practice the technique to the highest level. When you entered the cave in the morning, although I didn't come, I knew clearly about your progress last night." Chen Chin hugged Nanjing Fan's arm and said with a smile, "Why would I lie to you? Won't you know if you check?" Nanjing Fan woke up from her dream and immediately checked. She also practiced the Mortal Heart Sutra and was very familiar with it. After a while, she found it even more unbelievable. Although Chan Chen's internal strength didn't have any obvious improvement, but the Mortal Heart Sutra was indeed practiced to great success. Even she, as her master, could not catch up. If there were no surprises, Chen Chan would have practiced the Mortal Heart Sutra to perfection in less than 10 years. How? How is this possible? How is this possible? Abbess Jing Fan mumbled. It's only been a day, and she's already reached the realm of great success. Then, Nanjing Fan asked, "Chin Chinyu, what did you encounter in the refining heart cave?" "Master," Chin Chin said coquettishly, "this is disciple's privacy. You don't ask." As soon as Nanjing Fan said this, she also regretted it. She knew the secret inside. She knew that although Chin Chin was straightforward, he would definitely not answer this question. While Abbess Jing Fan had yet to recover from her shock and was still complaining about the unfairness of the heavens, Chin Chin smiled and asked Peacock, "Senior, you came out earlier than me, have you? Have you improved your heart technique?" Chun Chin was showing off a little. Her martial arts had never been as high as Peacock's, and her cultivation method was also a few notches lower. Now that she had made the great leap, of course, she wanted to show off in front of her senior. When Abbess Jing Fan heard this, she also asked, "That's right, Peacock, how's your heart technique?" Peacock was silent for a moment. She seemed to be organizing her words and hesitating at the same time. Seeing this, Master Jing Fan comforted her. "It's okay, Peacock. Your junior sister Chin Chin is just an anomaly. Don't complain about it. Just focus on your cultivation, and you won't fall behind her." Chun Chan was very happy, but she complained, "Master, look at what you're saying. Can't my martial arts be better than senior?" At this time, Peacock opened her mouth and said, "Junior, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you this time. Master, my mortal heart technique has been perfected." What? This was Master Jing Fan's surprise. How is that possible? This was Chen Chen's doubt towards Peacock. She also told Peacock what Master Jing Fan said. Master Jing Fan immediately checked, and sure enough, it was the same as Chin Chen's. There were no special changes in her martial arts and internal energy. Her heart technique had indeed been perfected. This was the realm that countless disciples of Mo Xian Temple had been pursuing for thousands of years. It was also the realm that Master Jing Fan dreamed of but could never reach. When Chun Chin saw this, she panicked and asked, "Senior Yu, what did you encounter in the refining heart cave? Why? It wasn't easy for me to become stronger than you, Yu. How did you leave me so far behind?" Peacock's face was burning, but she said, "Junior, are you confused? How can you talk about what happened in the refining heart cave?" Chun Chin was also stunned. Of course, he had been tight-lipped in front of his master. How could Peacock talk about it? After that, Chen Chen extinguished the thought of getting to the bottom of the matter. After a while, Chen Chen's gloomy mood disappeared. Even if Peacock was much better than him, wasn't he also one of the few disciples who had perfected the mortal heart technique in the past 1,000 years? After a long time, the petrified Master Jing Fan woke up from her shock and melancholy. She looked at the two disciples that she had raised lovingly and smiled. I forgot to quickly tell this good news to the leader. Our fragrant religion has produced an extremely talented disciple this time. The inheritance of Lingxiang Peak will not be lost. You two wait here for the other senior and junior sisters to come out. After that, she didn't wait for them to speak and used her qing gong to rush to the top of the mountain. Peacock and Chen Chen smiled when they saw that their master was so emotional. It was already late at night, and an elder was sitting cross-legged in the distance. He was meditating with his eyes closed and did not pay any attention to what Master Jing Fan and the others had said. In front of the refining heart cave, only Chen Chen and Peacock stood there alone. Fortunately, the two of them were standing in front and behind each other so they could talk. After Abbess Jing Fan left, Chen Chen was about to grab hold of Peacock and pester her to ask how she managed to master the Mortal Heart Sutra in such a short time. However, just as he reached out and was about to ask, he remembered what Peacock said. That's right. It's just my own experience. It's an anomaly. Who would have thought that my nemesis would be the guy who held the girl's hand, kissed her on the lips, and even set her marriage? How did he leave an impression in my heart? I only saw him as a person who could talk. He's just a little medicine boy in the pill-expanding hall. Now he's only been recognized by Elder Sage. He's just a disciple on duty at Shishim Peak. He's really too far away for me. How is it possible? Still, he was so handsome in the illusion. That martial arts. TSK, it's incredible. If I have a husband like him, it's worth it. It's just an illusion. How could he know such profound martial arts? And that ethereal heavenly axiom? That stellar transposition? How could a country bumpkin like him know that? If I can live in an illusion, I won't regret it for the rest of my life. Thinking of this, Chen Chen blushed shyly. Everything that happened in the illusion should not be described to others. It was the most secretive thing in her heart. Senior sister, what did you encounter? Chen Chen thought of her own romantic experience. She was curious about other people's privacy, but it was not appropriate to ask. Peacock stood there quietly. The wind of human mountain blew her clothes, but it could not blow up the veil covering her face. Her expression could not be seen. For a moment, in front of the refining heart cave on the seemingly desolate mountain peak, the two sisters were filled with thoughts. They lowered their heads and did not speak. Perhaps only God knew that these two poor sisters were thinking of the same person. And this person was sitting cross-legged in a secluded hut, taking stock of the day's harvest. First, he took out the small pitch-black bead. He had already seen this thing in the cave. Now, even if he used his divine sense with all his might, he could not penetrate it. Helpless, Zhang Xiaohua took out a small jade box and put the pitch-black bead away. Then he used the most effective technique he had at the moment. After that, it was the strange herbs that she had picked from the cave. They looked very old, and Zhang Xiaohua did not know the use of them. Zhang Xiaohua did not hurry to organize them. Instead, she took out the compendium of herbs and quickly skimmed through the parts that she had not seen before. Sure enough, in this jade scroll, not to mention the ghost face mushroom, there was nothing similar to these strange herbs. Moreover, from the compendium of herbs, Zhang Xiaohua vaguely felt that the ghost face mushroom, as well as those picked from the cave and the ghost valley, were not the same as ordinary herbs at all. Maybe it's because of the black fog and the herbs that are usually used to absorb the essence of heaven and earth. But this black fog is formed by the black gas that comes from underground. Could it be that this black gas is the same as the essence of heaven and earth? Zhang Xiaohua was deep in thought. No, the delusion breaker, I could only see things related to the essence of heaven and earth. Even a living person could not see it, since it could clearly see the black gas that was as thin as gossamer. Then this black gas must be extraordinary. Thinking about how little yellow used to rely on vitality stones to survive, and now it could absorb the black fog, black gas, and even that white thing, connecting all these together, it was easy to conclude that the black gas was also the essence of heaven and earth. Regardless of the essence of heaven and earth, these herbs are all precious. Who knows when they will be of use? It's better to keep them well. By the time she finished keeping the herbs, it was already very late. However, thinking about the day's harvest, Zhang Xiaohua was still in high spirits. I wonder where this Zhuchuan came from. I should ask Zhang Pinger who this Jingang is. Seeing how fearless he is, he must be a well-known figure on Lingering Fragrance Peak. TSK, that illusion array is really not bad. If I'm not practicing in the future, I might as well enjoy myself in it. Anyway, it's all fake and no one will know. Thinking about it, Zhang Xiaohua's face revealed a wretched smile. There was a gorgeous palace on Lingering Fragrance Peak. Although it wasn't dazzling, it was simple and elegant to the extreme. Every single brick and tile of the palace emitted a graceful and luxurious aura. There were countless pavilions within the palace that were brightly lit, and in the surroundings of the pavilions there was a gurgling stream, a small bridge, and the occasional red-crowned cranes that walked about emitted a serene and dignified aura. This was precisely Mo Shui Palace on Lingering Fragrance Peak. In the main hall of Mo Xian Palace, there were only a few people. An old woman in a palace robe was sitting at the front. The veil on her face hid her expression, but her tone was filled with surprise. What? Both Peacock and Chin had joined the battle? And his mortal heart mantra has improved greatly? -4. Chapter 858. Yes, senior sister. Peacock and Chin are outside the refining heart cave, waiting for the other disciples to come out. Just now I have already checked. Their mortal mantra has already reached an inconceivable height. I am ashamed to say that even I have never cultivated to their current level. I'm ashamed. Junior sister Jing Fan, you're thinking too much. Everyone has their own destiny. Junior sister just hasn't had the right time yet, so it's nothing. Besides, there's an old saying, the pupil surpasses the master. If the disciples aren't as good as the masters, then how can our fragrant religion be passed down from generation to generation and prosper? Jing Fan's face turned cold. She bowed and said, Thank you for your warning, senior sister. I'll remember it. Well, since the two of them have passed the primary selection and the mortal heart technique has reached great success, this time's primary selection can be said to be perfect and, the matter of inheritance can be considered settled. The hierarch's laughter was loud and clear. Congratulations, hierarch, an old woman next to her said. In the past, we had to first worry about the primary selection, then worry about the inheritance. Today, these two children have really done, well, they actually managed to overcome all the obstacles in the refining heart cave. It's really the blessing of the 10,000 years of fragrant religion's ancestors. Another masked elder also smiled. Hierarch, it can be seen that the time for our fragrant religion to prosper has arrived. Ha! The hierarch laughed and waved her hand. Although it's a joyous occasion and we can also inherit our immortal heart technique, it's still too early to say that it will prosper. Then she looked outside the palace, looking at the dark night. She said with some melancholy, In the past 10,000 years, the world has changed greatly. The immortal heart techniques, world yuan qi, has greatly decreased. Although our fragrant religion is blessed by the heavens, with the immortal heart techniques restrictions and formations, it's already difficult to retain a bit of world yuan qi on the 19 peaks. What's more, the aroma sect has an inheritance palace, and the secret rooms inside guarantee that each generation will have 1 or 2 disciples who practice the immortal Tao arts. Although the immortal Tao arts can't be used often, it's still an inheritance, and can guarantee that the aroma sect won't be wiped out in the Jianghu. Yes, the immortal heart technique is too powerful. No matter how high your martial arts are, it's still reduced in front of the immortal heart technique. Perhaps this is the main reason why our fragrant religion has been able to stand for 10,000 years. But the heart techniques room has a limited amount of primordial stones. I don't know how long it can last. Even this sect-protecting grand formation. To be honest, I'm not sure about it. The heart technique's appearance, Jianghu, is. This is the prophecy of an immortal Dao senior. Now that the great sect-protecting formation is becoming more and more stable, even the opening time has gradually become fixed. Although it is not the same as before, it can be considered normal. This concerns the survival of our fragrant religion. Everything is important. The hierarch said solemnly, "These are troubled times. Those rascals who sneaked into our fragrant religion have been making a lot of moves recently. If it weren't for the fact that we have to find the source and that the inheritance is more important, we would have eliminated them long ago." After thinking for a while, the hierarch said, "What's the situation in the ruins of Huan?" An elder bowed and said, "Hierarch, according to the disciple guarding the place, there were some movements in the ruins of Huan on the day of the heavenly thunder. But he can't be sure that the heavenly thunder has something to do with the ruins of Huan." How would he know? The hierarch sneered. "What heavenly thunder? It's clearly an attack from a Dharma artifact." The attack was so sharp that even the peak-protecting formation couldn't block it. What else could it be other than that thing in the ruins of Huan? Could it be that someone from the immortal path sneaked into our fragrant religion and tried to kill a weak disciple? Hierarch, you're right. Only an attack from that thing could have such power. It's just that this thing has been in the ruins of Huan for so many years without any movements. We don't even know what that thing is or what it looks like. How could it suddenly? The hierarch waved his hand and said worriedly, "Isn't this what I'm worried about? It's because of that thing's inexplicable problems that we're rushing the direct selection to confirm the inheritance. No matter what happens, you and I won't become sinners of the fragrant religion." Hierarch, you're wise. All the elders bowed and saluted. The elders have also worked hard. After a few hours, the direct selection will end. You should also let the hall masters of the various halls return and let them rest for a few days. Then we can discuss how to eliminate the rascals who have sneaked into the cult and the matter of entering Huansu. Yes, hierarch. Everyone was respectful. Early in the morning, the rising sun broke through the clouds. Zhang Xiaohua suddenly opened her eyes in the secluded little house. At the same time, in front of the refining heart cave at the western foot of Lingshan Peak, there was another female disciple in a purple palace dress beside Peacock and Qinchin. The three of them were sitting cross-legged. When they saw the sunlight, they immediately stood up from the ground. There was a soft clang, and the mysterious pattern that had been spinning for 24 hours stopped. Then, like rolling clouds, it surged toward the pitch-black cave entrance. When the light and pattern were about to disappear, there was a clear humph sound. Dozens of light threads shot out from the pitch-black cave and nailed themselves around Peacock and the others. Qinchin and the others seemed to have been warned and did not move. In a few breaths, the dozens of disciples who had entered the cave earlier suddenly appeared where they were standing. However, at this time they were in different forms. The moment the disciples of Emo Xian Palace appeared in front of the refining heart cave, the light threads on their bodies were retracted. The mysterious pattern began to slowly spin around the cave entrance. The rotation seemed slow, but was actually very fast. In just a moment, the cave entrance was sealed. With a paw sound, a black shadow shot out from the sealed cave entrance. The hierarch, who had been standing at the side, waved his hand. The black shadow that was about to fly away immediately changed direction and flew directly into the hierarch's hand. At this time, at the cave entrance, a few illusory shadows flashed and a stone tablet appeared. It had returned to its original state of not being opened yesterday. Looking at the dozens of female disciples of Mo, Xian Palace who were pushed out of the illusion array. They were all lying on the ground in different postures. Their expressions were very strange. Some are happy, some are sad, some are angry, some are angry, some were as calm as water. Some had their almond eyes wide open. Looking at their clothes, most of them were in a mess. Some were bare-chested, some were flirtatious, and some were even half undressed. In short, there was no one to speak of. Of course, there were also a few female disciples who were sitting cross-legged. However, the expressions on their faces were also very varied. It was as if they were fighting against their own inner demons. Peacock, Chin Chin, and the disciple who passed the official selection were all flushed under their veils as they thought of all their experiences. On the other hand, the sect leader and a few elders were calm. They methodically walked into the crowd of disciples and sealed their acupuncture points. After that, they tidied up everyone's clothes. Then they clapped their hands, and dozens of other female disciples came in a line from afar. They brought the disciples who had passed the direct selection out. After everything was tidied up, Jing Yi came in front of Peacock and the others. Looking at the third disciple, she was surprised. Yuyan, I didn't expect. You also passed the official selection. Not bad, not bad. The female disciple lowered her head and said shyly, Thank you, Hierarch, for your praise. It's all because of Master's teachings. Shuezhen has always been in charge of the affairs of the labor camp. I know that. I didn't expect her to have taught such a good disciple. Then, as if she thought of something, she asked, In the refining heart cave, the heart technique you practiced, did it make any progress? Yuyan's face was blank. No, Hierarch. I heard Master say that the refining heart cave is a trial of the mind. How could it have any effect on the heart technique? Then she thought of something and turned her head to look at Peacock and Chin Chin. Jing Yi clapped her hands and said, Good. No matter what, this year's official selection greatly exceeded our expectations. There were actually 3 disciples who stood out. This can be considered as making up for the lack of results of the official selection for the past 50 years. All right, Peacock, Chin Chin, Yin, you all go back and rest. In a few days, go to the Inheritance Palace and carry out the inheritance ceremony. Let's see which one of you can inherit my fragrance, sex legacy. Yes, we will follow Hierarch's orders. The 3 of them bowed. Below the Lingxiang Peak, in the fiery hall, a woman in palace attire sat high up on the throne. She smiled at the woman beside her who was also masked. Junior Sister Een, these few days of the official selection have been hard on you. Hierarch has ordered you to rest for a few more days. The woman shook her head and said, It's nothing. The official selection is related to the inheritance of our fragrance sect, who wouldn't do their best. Fortunately, Mo Xian Palace has 3 disciples who passed the official selection. This is better than the previous 10 years of hard work. Isn't that right? Elder Jingfan has 2 disciples all of a sudden, and even Abbess Shuezhen has a disciple. They both have good lives. Just look at my good-for-nothing disciples. If they were half as good as them, I would be satisfied. Senior Sister Hua, you can't say that. Every disciple has their own characteristics. They can't be lumped together. Hall Master Hua waved her hand. Forget it, Junior Sister Een. Don't say it. I have heard you say this for decades. You have 7 good disciples, especially the youngest, Zhang Pinger. TSK. She is so considerate to you. She even rushed to the Yulon Grand Canyon for your illness. How can I not be envious? Speaking of this, she suddenly thought of something and said, All right. I just heard from the disciples patrolling the mountain that your 3rd disciple, Mei Sujin, used our fiery hall's Lai Chui Valley yesterday. It seems that she was testing the martial arts of some disciple. That Lai Chui Valley is also known as the Ghost Valley. Go back and ask why did she use that place. Vice Hall Master Yin's expression changed greatly. She quickly got up and said, Understood, Senior Sister. I will immediately go back and investigate. I will report back to you. -4. Chapter 859. Lihua Temple, In the pavilion in the middle of the lake, Vice Temple Master Een sat with a veil on her face. She looked at the disciple in front of her and asked in a deep voice, "Suing, why do you want to use Li Chui Valley? Tell me." Mei Suing raised her head to look at her master, then looked at the expressionless eldest senior sister. She smiled and said, "It's nothing, master. It's just that the day before you went to Mo, Xian Palace, eldest senior sister told me to do something." Vice Temple Master Een frowned and turned to ask, "Shuiqi, why did you call Suing?" Me, eldest senior sister Han Zhuiqi, obviously didn't expect her to be involved. She was stunned and looked at Mei Suing strangely. When Mei Suing saw this, she immediately smiled and said, "Eldest senior sister, did you forget? Didn't you say a few days ago that Master told you to do something? You wanted to go to Mo Xian Palace with Master, but you were afraid that 7th junior sister would be anxious, so you told me?" Han Zhuiqi slapped her forehead and said, "That's right, Master. Didn't you tell me to test the martial arts of that alchemy disciple called Xiaoyao? This disciple was recommended by 7th junior sister and can be considered Master Savior. Disciple is going to Mo Xian Palace with Master. I was afraid that Ping would be anxious, so I chatted with 3rd junior sister. If Ping couldn't find us, I would let 3rd junior sister test for me." However, she immediately understood and turned pale with fright. "3rd junior sister, you wouldn't let this disciple go to Ghost Valley, would you?" "Why wouldn't I? He's going to Ghost Valley." Vice Temple Master Een coldly snorted and said, "Even the Temple Master knows. Temple Master knows." Mei Suing was also stunned. She immediately smiled and said, "Master, eldest senior sister, I'm just being kind. You see, no one has entered Li Chui Valley for a long time. There must be mountains of herbs inside. Letting Ren Xiaoyao take advantage of the opportunity to go in and pick some. Isn't it the best of both worlds? Furthermore, Sir Cult Leader has personally said that a martial arts test is a must. Disciple has thought for a long time, but still could not think of any test that fits Sir Cult Leader's taste. I only feel that testing martial arts in this Li Chui Valley can show Sir Cult Leader's benevolence." Deputy Hall Master Een didn't seem to be interested in asking so many questions. He waved his hand and said, "What are the results of the test? Did that Ren Xiaoyao come out alive?" Mei Suing shook her head slightly. "Disciple waited for 8 hours but didn't see any movement, so I came back first. 7th junior sister and 6th junior sister are standing guard over there. This disciple doesn't know the exact outcome. However, there are very few people in Li Chui Valley who can last for 6 hours. This disciple feels that." Hearing this, Vice Hall Master Een couldn't help but speak harshly. "You, Mei Sujin, don't you think you've gone too far?" Seeing that Vice Hall Master Een was angry, Mei Sujin immediately stood up and bowed. "Disciple knows her wrongs. Master, please punish me." "You." Vice Hall Master Een smiled bitterly. "No matter what, Ren Xiaoyao is Master Savior. Your 7th junior sister did everything she could to get him to distant Fire Hall. You, on the other hand, died a few days later. If I had known earlier, why would I have asked Sir Cult Leader for help?" "Master." Disciple also. Without waiting for Mei Sujin to finish speaking, a voice came from outside. "Master, eldest senior sister, you're finally back. You have to uphold justice for me." 2 women flew in. Wasn't the one who was shouting in front Zhang Pinger? Vice Hall Master Een shook his head. "Whoever you say will arrive. This lingering fragrance peak is really strange." As soon as she saw the pavilion, Zhang Pinger threw herself to the ground and cried, "Master, you have to uphold justice for me." 3rd senior sister. She used her position to avenge a private grudge. Mei Sujin was anxious and argued, "Master, don't listen to her nonsense. When did I use my position to avenge a private grudge?" Vice Hall Master Een glared at her and said angrily, "Shut up!" Then he comforted Zhang Pinger. Pinger, don't be anxious. Speak slowly. Thus, Zhang Pinger sobbed and told him about how she and Zhang Xiaohua met Mei Sujin that day. Vice Hall Master Yin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He glared at Mei Sujin again and said with a smile, "Your third senior sister was only joking with you. How could you take it seriously? Even if you offended Sujin that day, she wouldn't be so ruthless just because of a few words from Rin Xiaoyao. Just now, your third senior sister had already told Master the whole story. She only wanted to borrow Rin Xiaoyao's luck to pick more herbs. Who would have thought that it would end up like this? So, even if your third senior sister was wrong, it was an unintentional mistake. She didn't really want to take Rin Xiaoyao's life. Sigh, this Rin Xiaoyao was such a good child. It's all my fault. Pinger, I think this child's body is also gone. Make a cenotaph for him. When it's finished, Master will also burn incense for him." Zhang Pinger listened to Master's words. At first, she nodded, then shook her head. When she heard the last few words, she was even more puzzled. She wiped her tears and asked curiously, "Rin Xiaoyao is dead? Master, did third senior sister curse him in front of you again?" At this time, not only Vice Hall Master Yin, but Han Shuiqi and Mei Sujin were also surprised. "Rin Xiaoyao, he's not dead?" Seeing everyone surprised, Zhang Pinger felt better. She said proudly, "Rin Xiaoyao's martial arts are very good. How could a mere Ghost Valley take his life? If he's not dead, why are you crying?" Vice Hall Master Yin turned his head and looked at Shui Linglong, who came with Zhang Pinger. "Your seventh junior sister is right." "Yes, Master. I also saw it with my own eyes." Shui Linglong bowed and answered, "Ha, good. Linglong, go and call Ren Xiaoyao here." After Shui Linglong went out, Zhang Pinger took out the ghost face mushroom that Zhang Xiaohua gave her yesterday and said, "Not only did Ren Xiaoyao come out, but he also picked a 500-year-old ghost face mushroom." With a hiss, Vice Hall Master Yin sucked in a breath of cold air. "There's actually a 500-year-old ghost face mushroom." "Yes, Master. Rin Xiaoyao risked his life to pick it. According to him, he almost lost his life." Zhang Pinger said pitifully, "But this still doesn't meet third senior sister's requirement. Third senior sister wants Rin Xiaoyao to pick a 1,000-year-old ghost face mushroom to pass." "Woo, Master, this is the reason why I'm crying." "Ridiculous." Vice Hall Master Yin glared at Mei Suing for the third time. Mei Suing's face turned red. "Don't cry, Pinger. Master made the decision to let Ran Xiaoyao pass the Li Chui Valley's martial arts test." Zhang Pinger's face was slightly red, but there was joy in her eyes. She said, "Thank you, Master, for your kindness." "What kindness? Rin Xiaoyao has the strength. Of course he passed." Vice Hall Master Yin said with a smile. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua followed Shui Linglong to the pavilion on the water. Zhang Xiaohua stood at the entrance of the pavilion from afar and greeted everyone. Soon after, Vice Hall Master Yin said, "Ren Xiaoyao, congratulations on passing the martial arts test. You can take off your status as a reserve alchemy disciple. In a while, I will send someone to report to Mo Shuigong. Your waste token will be sent tomorrow. You are now an official alchemy disciple of the Li Hua Palace Hall." Zhang Xiaohua was not surprised. He bowed and said, "Thank you, Vice Hall Master, for your support." Vice Hall Master Yin said with a smile, "It's all your credit. You don't have to thank me." I saw that you passed through the Li Chui Valley yesterday. It seems like you didn't suffer any injuries." "Oh, your lips seem to be injured." Zhang Xiaohua's lips and neck were bitten yesterday. However, his body's self-healing ability was very strong. He recovered more than half of his body in one night. Only the teeth marks on his lips could be faintly seen. If it was a normal day, Vice Hall Master, he might not know. However, when he heard that Su Mo had passed through the Ghost Valley, he couldn't help but look carefully. Zhang Xiaohua touched his lips awkwardly and said, Yesterday, I accidentally fell down in the Leech Way Valley. Vice Hall Master Ian didn't pursue the matter. He only said, "Then tell me about what happened yesterday." Okay, Zhang Xiaohua knew that this moment would come. He had already planned it in his heart. He only told Vice Hall Master Ian about what happened yesterday. What did you say? The black fog in the Leech Way Valley has dissipated? Vice Hall Master Ian stood up and asked in shock. Zhang Xiaohua did not understand why Vice Hall Master Ian was so nervous. He rubbed his nose and said, "Vice Hall Master, think about it. If the black fog did not dissipate, how could I have the ability to pick the ghost face mushroom at the bottom of the valley?" Good. This can be considered a great contribution. Vice Hall Master Ian turned to Han Zhuqi and said, "Zhuqi, quickly go and confirm it. If it's true, immediately report to Mo Shuigong. The disappearance of the ghost fog in the Ghost Valley might be related to the fragrant cult." After Han Zhuqi took the order and left, Deputy Hall Master Ian asked again, "Ren Xiaoyao, since you didn't encounter the ghost fog at all, there is naturally no danger. But why didn't you come out immediately after picking up the ghost face mushroom? Instead, you stayed in there until it was dark?" Zhang Xiaohua laughed embarrassedly, reporting to Vice Hall Master, "Senior Mei wanted a 1,000-year-old ghost face mushroom. This is obviously not the ghost face mushroom. I searched the valley 3 times, but it was a waste of time. And what? And the night before yesterday, I heard that there was going to be a test yesterday. I was too excited and did not sleep well. Plus, I was tired from wandering around the Leech Way Valley. So I sat in a place facing the sun and fell asleep." Everyone was speechless. What kind of person is this? After a long while, Vice Hall Master Ian finally came to his senses. He clapped his hands and said, "What a lucky person." Then he thought for a moment and said, "However, Ren Xiaoyao, although you are an alchemy disciple of the Lihua Temple, you must strictly follow the rules of the temple. Step by step, I cannot give you too much help." Zhang Xiaohua laughed. "That is natural. I am willing to follow the rules of the Lihua Temple." "Good. As an alchemy disciple, you will start by guarding the garden. After you have learned the basics of watering, you can enter the pill room and learn the basic alchemy techniques. Guard the garden, a garden to grow herbs." It seemed that Zhang Xiaohua had always been fated to grow herbs. -4. Chapter 860. The sun was high up in the sky, illuminating the Lingxiang Peak. A pair of red-crowned cranes were leisurely strolling by the side of a secluded and flat mountain path. Occasionally, their long beaks would come into contact with each other. Their pure white wings, which were mixed with black spots, would flutter open and close. It was a peaceful scene. Suddenly, there seemed to be some noise. The pair of red-crowned cranes were startled. They spread their wings and flew up. However, just as they flew up, they turned their heads to look. Thinking that it was someone they knew, they circled around and landed on a mountain rock. "Look at you, senior brother. Every time, you purposely scare this pair of cranes. How could that be?" I just wanted to remind them that not everyone in this world is kind. Don't let your guard down just because others are kind. If there comes a day when they are no longer at Lingering Fragrance Peak, won't they be caught and roasted? Buffed. 2 young people, a man and a woman, came out from the corner. The young woman's skin was exceptionally white. Her features were picturesque. Her originally cold face was filled with charm when she smiled. She was Li Huahal's Zhang Pinger. As for the young man, needless to say, he was tall and thin, with small eyes and a flat nose. He was Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Pinger's smile was like a flower as she said, "Everyone says to burn the zither and cook the crane. You are good, roasting it and eating it. You are really, really shameless." Zhang Xiaohua still rubbed his nose and said in confusion, "What? Why didn't I notice this good point of mine?" Then, seeing that Zhang Pinger had finished laughing, he said in a serious tone, "Meat is easy to get old if it is cooked. It is better to roast it. It can add flavor and atmosphere. Plus, there is the 100-flower wine. TSK, TSK, just thinking about it makes me drool. The two red-crowned cranes quietly looked at the two people who had been walking on this mountain path recently. They were puzzled. One person was always talking with a straight face, while the other was always laughing. They were completely unaware that they had become roasted meat in someone's mouth. As the two of them talked, they walked away. Their laughter gradually faded away. But after a while, it was unknown what was so funny, but the sound of silver bells rang out again. At this time, several male disciples came from behind. When they heard the clear and melodious voice in front of them, their faces unconsciously revealed expressions of jealousy, envy, and puzzlement. One of the disciples curled his lips and said, "I don't know how this little brat called Rin Xiaoyao managed to win senior sister Zhang's favor. How could the two of them be so brazen? Everyone has their own preferences. Who knows? Isn't that so? Senior brother Yu from Mo Nonggong is so wise and mighty. How could he not enter senior sister Zhang's eyes? Not to mention senior martial brother Yu. Even I am more handsome than this Rin Xiaoyao, aren't I? Senior sister Zhang didn't even spare me a glance. By the way, did senior martial brother Yu leave the mountain for business? Why haven't I seen him for so long? Wait and see. When senior brother Yu returns, there'll definitely be a good show. Isn't that so? Isn't he just a little medicine boy from the Pill Tower Hall? He actually managed to hug senior sister Zhang's thigh. But who is senior sister Zhang? She is the cold beauty of our Fire Palace Hall. She is the person that senior martial brother Yu likes. He actually dares to get involved. Just wait to be taught a lesson." As he spoke, the disciple picked up a small stone from the ground. He didn't use any strength in his hand and directly threw it at the red-crowned crane that was standing beside the mountain rock. The red-crowned crane was obviously used to these people. It wasn't vigilant until the small stone hit its body. Although it didn't hurt, it was still startled and flew away. A few clear and loud cries rang out. The two red-crowned cranes circled a few times. They looked at the crowd with puzzled eyes and spread their wings to fly away. "Why did you provoke these red-crowned cranes for no reason?" A disciple scolded. The disciple said in a bad mood, "I didn't think so before. These red-crowned cranes are similar to that tall and thin Rin Xiaoyao. My heart is indescribably vexed. Forget it, let's go." The crowd rushed away noisily. It had been a few days since Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts test. Under the consolation of her master, Zhang Pinger didn't manage to get any reply from Mei Sujin. After all, Mei Sujin had been entrusted by senior sister and could do it at a cheaper price. Although the Ghost Valley test was a little difficult, according to Zhang Xiaohua, there wasn't any black fog inside. Instead, it became the simplest test of picking herbs. Moreover, Zhang Xiaohua even slept inside and came out. This made everyone speechless. Therefore, they could only conclude with Zhang Xiaohua successfully passing the test and receiving the job of looking after the herb garden. Of course, what happened next was just as Zhang Pinger wished. Vice Hall Master Yin found a medicinal garden not far from Zhang Pinger's alchemy room for her. Moreover, this garden was quite a distance away from the other gardens, so it was very quiet. Due to this convenience, Zhang Pinger would drop by Zhang Xiaohua's little house every morning and call Zhang Xiaohua to walk together. The two's intimacy was witnessed by the distant Fire Palace disciples. How could they not be jealous? They only felt that this Zhang Xiaohua had run into dog-shit luck and gained Zhang Pinger's favor. As they looked around in self-pity, they also hoped that the so-called senior brother Yu would come over and give him a little suffering. Actually, even Zhang Pinger's heart was a little anxious. Before the secluded orchid evening refinement, Yu Zhuqiuan would come over almost every day. Even when she was recuperating, she did not speak much to him, and he would also appear in front of her every few days. However, these few days, she had not seen Yu Zhuqiuan, and Zhang Pinger's entire heart was on Zhang Xiaohua. Her heart was filled with joy and uneasiness. Seeing the two of them walking to a flat herb garden Zhang Pinger smiled and said, "Senior brother, then. You can go ahead with your work. Remember, read up on the books on growing herbs. If there's anything you don't understand, I'll help you ask Master. However, I think that with Senior Brother's inner strength, this will be a small matter. If not for Master saying that you have to progress step by step, I would have already given you the vitality stones to try. No matter, no matter. Junior sister, don't be anxious. I've only been here for a few days, and it's not good to stand out too much. I know that Senior Brother is modest. Hee hee. What would Senior Brother like to eat for lunch?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly. "There's no need, Junior sister. I'll just eat some wild fruits on the mountain. I'm not interested in other things." TSK FSK, who said that he wanted to roast the red-crowned crane. Did I hear wrongly? Zhang Xiaohua looked up at the sky and said, "Is that so? Who? Why didn't I know?" "Ha ha ha!" Zhang Pinger laughed and waved her hand. She ran forward, and after walking for a while, she immediately turned back and said, "Wait for me for lunch." After saying that, she did not wait for Zhang Xiaohua to reply and immediately ran away. Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head. Seeing Zhang Pinger's increasingly obvious actions, he really did not know how to deal with it. He had only casually said some witty words, and it was enough to make her laugh. Just a few days ago, they had inadvertently touched each other's arms. These few days, she had been pestering Zhang Xiaohua for lunch. After a few more days, he did not know how far it would develop. Was this still the famous ice beauty of the distant flame hall? Zhang Xiaohua turned around and entered the herb garden. He muttered to himself, "Could this be the legendary girl chasing a guy?" After entering the garden, Zhang Xiaohua found the tree that he usually sat under and took out a book. It was the book that Zhang Pinger had secretly given to him a few days ago. She said that it was a book that distant flame hall's alchemists had to read. When Zhang Xiaohua heard it, he knew that it was something that he would need to learn in the future. Zhang Pinger was just being selfish and wanted him to learn as soon as possible. Hence, he did not decline and kept it. Although Zhang Xiaohua didn't care about it, when he opened the book for the first time, he was shocked, even surprised, because what was recorded in the book was none other than the immortal Tao method of growing medicinal herbs. Oh, this description was not accurate. It should be similar to the ecstasy finger. It should be using martial arts to imitate the immortal way to grow herbs. Of course, this method was not the same as Zhang Xiaohua using the immortal way to clear the weeds and pluck the herbs. It was using the immortal way to activate the yuan qi in the primordial stone to nourish the herbs in the field. It was the same as Zhang Xiaohua using the heaven and earth yuan qi to nourish the herbs. Like I said, the immortal way of growing herbs must have its own immortal way of growing herbs. How can it be the same as a normal person growing food? Using the immortal way to activate the yuan qi is the right way. However, Zhang Xiaohua was still puzzled. This book only talked about how to activate the yuan qi. It did not explain how to clear the weeds and how to water the spring water. But after thinking about it, he understood how precious the primordial stone was. Using it to activate the yuan qi to nourish the herbs was already the limit of the incense sect. As for clearing the weeds, watering the spring water, and plucking the herbs, it was better to do it by hand. There was a lot of content in the book, and the methods used were all different. Zhang Xiaohua had been reading it carefully for the past few days. He already had the primordial stone in his pocket, so of course he was in a favorable position. He sat under a tree and read the contents of the book. Just as he was about to take out the primordial stone from his pocket, he suddenly heard a few people walking by the side of the herb garden. Zhang Xiaohua naturally turned his head to look and saw a few people walking by and looking at him. One of them said loudly, "Look, isn't that the brat? That gigolo? That guy who lives off a woman, Pui?" He spat on the ground. "If Senior Brother Yu is not here, why didn't Senior Brother Yin teach him a lesson? The more I look at this brat, the more uncomfortable I feel. You don't know this, but Senior Sister Zhang is the direct disciple of our Vice Hall Master. With such a big tree, who would be afraid of her? Even Senior Brother Yen would have to avoid her in the future. Shoo, lower your voice. It won't be good if others hear you. Hee, this brat is just a junior now. What can he do to me? Even if he has a meteoric rise in the future, why would he care about what I say today? If I don't say a few words now, it will be difficult for me to say them in the future. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he could only shake his head and look at the sky for no reason. Who knows my heart? On the lingering fragrance peak, in a large hall below the tall platform, a middle-aged man with a pair of bright eyes was holding a book in his hand. He was reading it attentively. A young disciple rushed in and stood at the entrance of the hall, reporting to Marshal Uncle. This disciple has something to report. The middle-aged man was rather unhappy. He looked away from the book and scolded. Can't you see that I am busy? If there is nothing important, don't disturb me. The disciple panicked, but he quickly walked forward and whispered a few words into the middle-aged man's ear. What? How long has it been since third brother returned? -4.